11.2 discussion continues here on the PoddyC. Dorky, you've had a chance to play the new dungeon. How is that?
It's pretty cool so far. It's mechanically more interesting and visually it looks nice. Also, the mechanics are a lot clearer than before.
That's good.
So
I want to start stating that we don't really have a.
Peace, friend.
I haven't played the PTR, so they're going to talk about the PTR stuff.
The winds
so
guide you.
that's where this is kind of going. I don't really. There's not a whole lot of commentary. However, there are some things that I do have some.
Ancestors
So,
watch
but
over.
we're just going to watch through it anyway. So.
it feels like a lot of the mechanics are similar to mobs we've seen in the past. Like,
But
one of the mobs is literally the Dark Fuse Inspector from Floodgate. It's the mob that just teleports behind you and does like a frontal, except it's like a much better visual and easier to avoid line. And also just like random mobs, like there's one mob that just does like the Gorchob mob leap, where it just like jumps on your head and does a cast. I think it's a solid dungeon so far. I've been pretty optimistic about the new dungeons, and Floodgate was definitely a huge banger. This one, I would say it's like pretty good so far, but nothing special about it.
Dude, did we talk about the mega dungeon thing last week or last episode?
I don't think we got to it.
Okay, yeah, I think that's something we should cover hugely because I'm a big fan of this. So for anybody who hasn't
Yeah, can
followed
you
all
explain
the...
it to me? I'm not quite sure. I just know that like Tazavesh is like a city we can go to, or is it like?
So yeah, Tazavesh was a mega dungeon the first time around, right? But they split it into 2 wings for M+. Now they're still splitting it into 2 wings for M+, but they're not for M0. There's no M0 Tazavesh next time around. And instead, if you do Mythic Tazavesh, it's just all 8 bosses. It's no timer, and it's tuned like a +10, and it gives loot like a +10. And they said it maybe gives Great Vault like a +10, and I really think it should, and hopefully it does. And then it's like a, you know, non-timed but difficult like a +10 Mythic Dungeon experience thing, which I am a huge fan of. Dawn of the Infinite had a little bit like this, except you didn't get Vault, but there was like +10 equivalent gear you could get out of it for the hard mode and stuff, and I thought that was a big W, and I would love it if there's more stuff like that more often. So I think this is going to be, it's going to be really nice for people that the time pressure, the possibility of like depleting and wiping and stuff, your key, losing your key, those things just not existing will make them way more interested in the content, because there's a lot of people that's like the big turnoff for M+.
Isn't that what? I feel like hard modes right when these mega dungeons came out, which was like in the middle of the second patch usually of an expansion, the past couple expansions, not this one. And you would do like the hard mode, it'd be really cool, but then you'd like outgear it right away, or it would lose its novelty, and then as soon as it came out on Mythic Plus, that like experience was gone forever. So I just think it's cool that they're building it into like an actual relevant seasonal gearing thing.
Yeah, when you mentioned outgearing it, that's how I feel about the Delve underpins too. You know what I'm talking about? I feel like, I mean, have you guys even really done a whole lot of those underpins?
I did them week 1.
Yeah, like they were kind of cool at first, right? Like
Yeah,
it's
I
kind
have
of
no
cool
reason to
go back.
I have no idea what you're.
you can't like well, you could infinitely scale the underpin boss stuff. Like what he means is like the it's the mini boss they've been coming out with, and like underpin basically, and it doesn't scale for a reason. It doesn't scale because the players that need the scaling of their gear and, you know, things like that, they need that to accomplish that goal. You know, I think I get what he's saying, but then why don't they just put infinitely scaling delves? Because all it is a delve with a world boss in it, you know, to solo. So why don't we just do infinitely scaling delves, which I think is the direction we're going with this. But you know, it's a good idea from Dorky.
talking about.
Like the
Literally,
boss,
the Mage
Delve
Tower
boss.
challenge thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind
Oh,
of
okay.
sweet,
Have a
but
great day now.
you know, not tuned nowhere close to a Mage Tower, which makes sense. I don't know. I feel like that would be like, I do a lot of delves every week. If I could replace one of them with just doing the boss again, I would for my vault. Like that would be sick. But there's no like incentive to do it, so you don't. And I think that's the thing with the mega dungeon as well. Like if it doesn't give a good vault, then there's no incentive to do it. But like if it does, and then you're sitting there and you're like, hey, I need some more vault slots. What if we just go do tap?
I think what he's really asking for is more difficulties on the underpin, boss in general. So, which is okay, but so you need a third question mark or a fourth question mark, one to beat. I guess that's fine, because at some like okay, so the double question mark eventually you'll once you get max gear and stuff, it's not fun anymore. But yeah, and there's some classes that just won't be able to do that. That'll just be hindered. But all right, and good idea still.
Instead of doing a key, right? Like it'll be more chill.
There's definitely been a demand for challenging 5-man content that isn't just M+, because a lot of people don't like the timer aspect of M+, and
Yeah, exactly.
it does suck that there isn't more of this. I mean, I remember talking about this back in the beginning of the expansion, I believe, where I was like, man, maybe we should really expand on the whole idea of hard mode Dawn of the Infinite, where if you do a deathless run, you actually get myth track loot. Was it myth track loot, or it was like
You got myth track from the last boss, yeah. If you did it.
yeah,
if you did the
yeah,
Deathless
yeah,
run.
and that was cool as hell.
Alrighty then.
Yeah.
Like I wish they did more of that.
Alrighty
So this is
then.
basically that. This is basically like that, but without the myth track stuff. But maybe with the myth track stuff from the vault, because the thing about the Dawn of the Infinite was you didn't get a good vault at all from it. You got an M0 vault. If this one gives a good vault, then the myth track for everybody from that. Which, yeah, I think it's huge. I mean, again, I'm somebody who loves the timer part of M+, but I think it would be really healthy if there was more, rather than them having to, sometimes tone down the timer challenge in M+ and like have to worry about having, about making M+ timers too tight and things, which obviously like you have to balance that as well. But if you always have a safety valve where people who don't want that time pressure just don't have to engage with it, I think that would be really good.
So by taking the timer away from M+, all right, because the timer is everything. So what do you do? What is your offset? What is your what are you going to then take away from the looting system? Because really, what are you going to give, like, if you don't time a dungeon, do you get, what reward? What level of loot do you get? Like, what are we, like, it doesn't make sense to take the timer away from M+ at all. Like, because the rewards are going to be based on the timer. So if you take the timer away, like, do you give them 2 eye level less? Is it a champion 2? Like, does champion 4 gear drop for timed stuff, or hero 1, and then you get, like, that doesn't make much sense to me. Like, I feel like what he's talking about is having more of a relaxed kind of classic approach, like we just had with BRD. It's serious. It's kind of serious. It's good content, or good rating, good vibe, good lore, with a serious undertone that we want to be successful and we want to go in this general direction with the 5-man group stuff. But it doesn't have to be raid quality. Like, you don't have to be like consumable out. You don't have to do all of that as well. So I think that's kind of where I guess it's going. Like, because there's not too many places the devs can like take that. How are you gonna reverse engineer that? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know where, like, like, how do you? The only thing you have delves, you have solo content, that you can do with a group, you know. But but the delves don't have timers for the most part. So I guess my point is, even if you come out with that content, it just becomes classic. So why are you pushing retail? My question to Dorky would be why are you pushing something that already exists in classic? Why don't you just push those players to classic and quit trying to say, oh, we need this non-timer, non-competitive thing in retail? Why don't you let the competitive people stay in retail and then push the people that don't want the timer to classic kind of thing? Like, and I know there's going to be a lot of in between here, and there's going to be a lot of people, well, I don't want to play classic, I want to play retail, I just don't want the extra anxiety of a timer or something like that. The timer is what makes M+, the timer is what makes it competitive. Because there's nothing else, unless you're going for just straight stats, a single target who can do the most DPS kind of thing. Like, you either do a DPS check on this or not, which it kind of is anyway, So I guess just say what it is.
So yeah, I think it's a huge W if they expand, especially if they expand on this further. Like, if every season, if they just moved Mythic Dungeons to this, and they kind of did this like at the start of this expansion. You guys remember we were like, oh yeah, they made Mythic Dungeons way harder, and Heroic Dungeons are what Mythic Dungeons used to be, and normal dungeons are what Heroic Dungeons used to be, and like
that just never
was
happened.
clearly not true, right? Like,
I say with the key level squish too. Like,
yeah,
that whole key level squish thing was kind of like a big deal at the beginning of the expansion and like end of season 4 Dragonflight, but it's gone to the point where 10s are back to just what they were before, pretty much. So it's kind of
Wait, really?
it's something pretty much. Yeah, I mean,
like an old 10, like when 20s gave you the portals.
I'd say it's still probably a little bit harder still. Well, I mean, not exactly like 20s portals, but like 10s are still kind of a joke right now, and 10s were supposed to be like, pretty challenging. That's where you get your
10's at what eye level? 10's at the eye level that we ran them on week 2 or week 1. Because those were challenging, but they're not impossible. So, I mean, 10s are going to be. It has to get easier. The whole point of the patch is like at the end of the patch, like, get easier, so people can get a feel for what the patch was day one. You want that, even though it won't be exactly the same because of the nerfs and the gear upgrades. But you want to give them a general sense, so if somebody wants to get better, they can. Because if not, then they'll never be able to learn.
Do you get Myth Track loot from 10s? I don't remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, you do, right?
10s,
From your vaults.
You need 10s, yeah.
Yeah. So it kind of lost that whole novelty of the 10s being the major challenge. That's when you start getting into high keys.
Yeah. The squish, I don't know. I mean, I guess people are doing what, 20...
Up to 22.
20s, 21s instead of... people were doing like 30s and stuff in some previous seasons, but I don't know. It really doesn't
It's slowly
feel that...
getting back there.
Yeah, exactly. Like the start of BFA was also 20s. That was...
I think they're getting too caught up in just sheer numbers of what it means. If the scaling of the gear is different, the squish and the expansion of the key levels don't matter. Like, for instance, like, if I make the gear 25% more and expand the ease of the keys to where they don't, you can get higher keys and inflate the keys, that on the surface level feel good, that's not really, and I get that's kind of what he's saying with the 10s, but it's surface level feel good. I don't like that. I want the hard content to be hard. Now, and you don't have to adjust the number. Adjusting the number just means kind of as we go through the patch, kind of thing. But it doesn't really mean much, other than it's artificial inflation, basically. That's really what it comes down to.
It feels more like that than like they squished it so that the 1 to 10 experience is completely different. So I don't know. Again, I don't think it was necessarily that important of a thing to actually. It's one of those things where I don't really care that they didn't succeed at it because I don't think it was an important thing to succeed at. So
Yeah.
who cares?
Yeah, speaking of which, that group I was talking about the other week, the Brewmaster no comms group that has been doing high keys, they actually
Yeah.
timed a 22 Dark Flame Cleft, which is extremely impressive. That's like literally a rank 1 world key as Brewmaster, a non-meta comp, no comms. That is actually insane.
The non-meta comp is like maybe they're the new meta. You know what I mean? Or maybe that's what the meta should have been the whole time. You know, so if you put aside the whole interrupt problems, you know, with the with the silences and the stops versus interrupts and kicks and things like that, and the different levels of it that we explained. So
People are doing, what,
Dratnos,
20.
so basically Dratnos says this is kind of a non-issue. It's artificial, and he sees it, and he's not really worried about it. But he could see how some people would get like butthurt against it. That, oh man, we were only supposed to do, we could do 20s back then, but we do 10s now. Like, you know,
Be careful.
and all that is padding, basically, artificial inflation.
So that the 1
We
to
got our molten core attuned. That's good. So
10 experience is completely different. So I don't know. Again, I don't think it was necessarily that important of a thing to actually. It's one of those things where I don't really care that they didn't succeed at it because I don't think it was an important thing to succeed at. So
Yeah.
who cares?
Yeah, speaking of which, that group I was talking about the other week, the Brewmaster no comms group that has been doing high keys, they actually
Yeah.
timed a 22 Dark Flame Cleft, which is extremely impressive. That's like literally a rank
It is
1 world
impressive.
key as Brewmaster, a non-meta comp, no comms. That is actually.
So the no comms is probably the most impressive part about that. But also it kind of shows you that there's not just one meta, you know, in this game. There's one meta for the item level, basically. Do I think this would be the best meta comp? Do I think this would be the meta comp if we were day one? Absolutely not. So, and I think the meta changes. I just think nobody has a lot of time to really figure it out. I think that's really what it comes down to. And it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that something like this would come out at the very a week 15 or something like that, when this could have been like a week 5 thing and could have been groundbreaking if people would have known about it, you know. And what this really comes back to is my last video, my last commentary video on this, is it really comes down to Blizzard making this game more uniform. So the meta isn't really a meta; it's more of a, you know, you take out the stops, but you take out the frills and things like that, and the class uniqueness, things like that. You're not forcing a meta by having a more uniform classes and what they can do when it comes to like stops, mass stops, and things like that. You basically break up the meta and you expand the meta to where you can put certain things in. You can plug and take away the pieces a little bit better, mix and match.
Say,
I mean, the comp is good,
Mhm.
right? I think like
It's good.
when you say
Yeah.
non-meta comp, I think like they're just like literally just doing like, what was that Raider IO competition they did where it was
Break
like,
the meta.
meta.
Oh, dude, there's
Yeah.
break the meta drama this season that just happened as well.
oh,
Because like they announced it and Unholy DK wasn't a meta spec and Havoc Demon Hunter was, or something, because of like the way that they calculated it. And there's always like some drama around it because they usually are trying to make sure that every class has at least one spec represented, and also they like look at all the data, not just the high keys. So, you know, stuff like Ret Pally or whatever is always banned, and it's weird. But this time around, there was a lot of drama in particular around.
But Ret Pally, Ret Paladin is going to be always banned because it fits the model. It fits the model like easily, and maybe that's something that Blizzard needs to address. Maybe Ret Paladin shouldn't do that, but I have a feeling that Ret Paladin is the baseline for melee DPS on the scale of in the statistics realm, and I think it's easily modelable, and I think everything else kind of goes to that, and I think there's a lot of things that point to that as well, and so with that said, that Ret Paladin is interchangeable, but a lot of people think that's boring. They want to see something different being played, and I understand that too. But this is also where we're kind of getting into Blizzard needs to make the game more uniform. Do we want that? Do we want that out of this kind of gameplay? Do we want Blizzard to push the uniformity of the game to be every class to be Ret Paladin, like to where everything is kind of balanced, things like that? We don't have what we talked about with Syndragosa's breath last week, with DK, and we don't have to worry about that kind of balancing issue. I don't think Ret Paladin is necessarily that groundbreaking.
I think it was mostly like Unholy not counting as meta was the thing that got people really riled up on the internet.
Well, yeah, I mean, Unholy's like insane. It's one of the best classes in the best comp. How the fuck would it ever? Is it like due to keys? How do they determine the break the meta stuff? Is it from like a lower level?
It's they like use a combination that changes
how
season
much
to
it's
season
represented
of their own judgment, and then looking at data in different ways and making. I think something that has definitely. So I've helped them in the past, not this time around, but sometimes in the past, I've helped them like choose the specs, and they're a goal is like every class has a spec in there ideally. Although there was one season that both Havoc and Vengeance were great, and so they banned both of them and then did like a special DH event later. But yeah, like looking at all data, but also top keys, but also all data. And I don't know. That's,
how popular is
opaque.
the break the meta event?
Recently popular.
Oh, okay. People interact with it.
Yeah.
I don't even know anything about it, to be honest. I've never.
I don't know how many people. I don't know the number, but I do know that it generates discourse every time.
Yeah. I mean, if it generates discourse, it is popular, because if like no one did it and no one cared about it, that discourse wouldn't exist when they did things like that.
Okay, they have a methodology posted this time around. So, okay, they looked at the data from the last 6 weeks, and then the goal is to determine what is the meta for the majority of players, which is always a complicated task. And then they justified it by saying, okay, look, 10s and 12s are by far the most common keys.
Yeah.
But with the way the meta seems to shift as the level gets higher, we believe focusing on 12 and higher made the most sense for this season to break the meta. So for the last 6 weeks, we take the bottom 50% of specs for each role by representation, and then from this point, we make adjustments as needed to accommodate various considerations. But we believe this methodology is adjustments is needed to accommodate various considerations that they don't actually enumerate here. But yeah, Unholy is now banned on the list, and Havoc's still off the list. But yeah, there's
So basically, Unholy is a stat sticks. They're high DPS, but you don't need grip. They don't have a raid buff to give anybody. They have AMZ, which is kind of what Blizzard's saying that is their raid buff, and that's a really good raid buff in fights. That it's really, really good. It is. So like I said last time, is AMZ either grip needs to do two things, or they need to get something. They need to get like a more offensive, non-positioning thing that shares a cooldown with grip, or shares a cooldown with AMZ, like a 2 or 3 minute cooldown, whatever it is, to give the raid as a positive buff or a negative buff to enemies or something like that. I don't know what that looks like, but just kind of something. So I don't think it needs a buff necessarily to where this has to be. I don't think this has to be something that's like you have to bring one to raid kind of thing. I think they're kind of solidified in where their thinking is from a delve point of view, or from a raid point of view of who to bring and why to bring them, like of why you want to bring a Death Knight to a raid. I think they're solidified and happy with that. But you shouldn't be, in a 20-man raid, in a 30-man raid, there's going to be a Death Knight in there. There's just going to be. So, definitely. And I think they're playing to majority of players. I think the criticism comes in Mythic, basically where you capped at 20.
Like Ret, of the pool of keys that they looked at, like Ret is the most common one by quite a bit. Which, yeah.
The real surprising part is that you're somehow involved in this too, Dranos. How are you always involved in these?
I'm not this time around, but I have in the past helped them.
He's a man of the
Sometimes they
people.
would have me like, sanity check the like, hey, we've got this list, and there were a few seasons where I would flag something like if Unholy was on the list this time around. Those are the kind of things that jump. Like this time around, for instance, Destro is a spec you can use, despite I think it being fairly thought of as like we saw a lot of Destro in the MDI. But there's just not a lot of it in high keys right now. There's more demos, so demos.
Well, nobody can hold threat. Dorky said this last podcast. This is why Dorky was using the pot in MDI to increase his threat, because dev evokers are basically ripping threat. They're so bursty in AoE situations. They do great damage. Tanks can't hold threat with that kind of burst, which is really, really good in a lot of ways and really, really sucks in other ways. However, you're getting to a kind of a classic kind of mindset, and I don't know if the retail community really wants that. So, there's that.
Banned and Destro isn't. And then again, like stuff like Rep being banned. It's tough because like if there was a high key group that was using Rep Pally, people would think of that as off meta, but it is the most popular spec by far in just the.
It's only, like I said, it's only popular because it fits the model, and the model isn't necessarily the meta. Okay, the model is that we need something that does these three things well. Rep Pally just happens to do that. Okay, and you can put other things in there. Rep Pally just might have more survivability or more something else as well. So I wouldn't consider necessarily the Rep Pally being the meta. I think it's what people just kind of maybe, when you look at the other things, the defensives, the cooldowns, the rotation, the Rep Pally fits a little bit better necessarily. And it's one of the more popular classes, so yeah, it's going to get hit hard. If you're trying to widen the meta, which I think you are, but the only way you're going to do that, like I said, is uniformity. If you're trying to do that to where more things fit in here, and where the Rep Pally isn't necessarily what gets banned out of the break the meta thing, then sure. You're going to have to get uniform. You're going to have to give classes utility and survivability that a Rep Pally would bring, basically. So, but that's what the devs would have to
12
do.
and up bracket. So, I don't really have a point with this. Just interesting.
Yeah.
I think I hijacked Max just saying the words "break the meta" for some other.
I don't even remember what I was talking about.
Yeah.
What was I talking about? Oh, I was just, I don't even know why. I was like, he just said it was like an off-meta comp, and that makes, when I initially heard that, I'm like, oh, okay, it's just like some ragtag group of whatever, but it's like the comp is like fucking awesome, and it's like pretty close, probably pretty close for you. I mean, it's a fact, literally the fact that they are timing world first keys with it means that comp is probably very comparable, if not very competitive with whatever you would consider the meta comp.
Well, so what makes it interesting is every single one of the individual specs are different from quote-unquote meta comp. Because, normally when people are having this whole discussion of like, all right, well, what are the best specs? You know, some will say like, you know, maybe Boomkin's the most OP part of the metacomp, or VDH is the most OP part, or like Disc Priest. Everyone always complains about how Oracle Disc Priest is OP, but that comp has literally none of it. It has no Arcane Mage, no Boomkin, no none of that, and it somehow just like works out. It's because of like the combination of those specs. Because if you try to put like if you try to like put a Disc Priest in that group or an Arcane Mage in that group, it's probably gonna stink. I mean,
yeah, I play a lot of retail too. I think retail is more for the competitive natured people. So I think if you're more competitive, retail is where you want to be. If you want more of a laid back leveling experience, then and it's not a knock. It's not a knock on like anything. So it's just kind of, you know, the truth of where it's at. So I think that's where it really is the schism. So
maybe it won't like stink, but it won't be as good as what it is.
It's not as like there's not as much synergy. Like a lot of the a lot of the like buffs in that group, they all work with all of those classes and the buffs and the meta. There's like a magic meta comp and a physical meta comp.
There are a lot of seasons though where it's like somebody will claim to be on an off meta comp, but they've just got like 4 meta specs and then 1 off meta spec.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly.
And this is different than that. It's like
but that can be significantly worse though, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is maybe the first time ever where you can build a comp that's completely different from what is the normal meta comp, and there are like many different types of these.
Has been hyped in the past, but I think this is the best it's ever actually been. Yeah.
That is true. Yeah.
Dude, speaking of social media happenings, you guys seen the DH Discord trying to start a movement about Death Grip not being a raid buff?
Oh, you mean DK?
DH or DK?
DK, sorry, DK.
Yeah,
DKs are.
Is that a new movement? I feel like DKs have been on the Grip isn't a raid buff train for like.
They're trying to start like a hashtag, and
oh, I see.
And plead their case to, you know, the public, the devs, I guess.
Well, yeah, I mean, Blizzard did double down last week. They said specifically, hey, you know, the whole raid buff situation. Well, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna kill A-Bomb Limb, and we're gonna buff AMZ for raid, and make more stuff grippable. Like, that becomes your raid buff. Have fun, DKs. Like, now you should be happy, but DKs are. I mean,
AMZ for raid is crazy. Like, the AMZ is fucking so good. Like, the version of AMZ they have right now is, like, especially with the way the fights will play out this year, is, like, it's just, like, the best utility that any class in the game has.
Well, do you think you would play a DK if it was not as tuned as the other DPS specs?
I mean, it just depends how far off. Like, in raid, tuning is usually, like, pretty close. Like, there's classes are usually pretty viable all the time, and if one of your classes is bringing a 15% is basically bringing Disc Priest barrier, same cooldown, almost the same DR. I mean, that's fucking insane. That's crazy insane. Not that it should be nerfed. That's fine, I guess, for now. Yeah,
Max is trying to kill AMZ again.
I'm just telling you how it is. It's fucking crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, AMZ is definitely. There will be fights where it's sick, right? Like where, and the thing is,
it's sick in like every scenario
in a way that the other raid buffs don't.
It's because every time it's good, every time it's like really, really good, it's great. There's no like, okay, I'm gonna cheat an AMZ here because it's kind of needed, but it's kind of not. Like, no, you're gonna AMZ here because it's the best thing that we have to offer right now, you know, and it's going to mitigate the most damage of all these other cooldowns that we could possibly throw at it. So AMZ goes down now. Like, that's why it's astounding that DKs are complaining about this. Is every single cooldown, like, they want this is what they want. They want a raid cooldown or a raid buff that not only brings them the raid, but makes them like self-sustaining to the point of they're their own healer. Basically, that's what they want, and they just can't. They have to realize they can't have everything in this game. I know Blizzard gave you everything in this game when Wrath of the Lich King came out. I know that, and I know it was cool, but you just can't. There has to be some kind of balance to this game, because if they're not, then you'll end up bringing classic raid comps back. You'll have 10 DKs, and the rest will be assorted healers, and and there's a lot of players out there that are like, what's wrong with that? I hear them now. Like, I hear them right now. They'd be like, what's wrong with that, man? What's wrong with that is in Classic, I saw a 40-man raid the other day and had 25 warriors in it. There's a problem with that. The last 10 minutes of the conversation were how to broaden the meta. And now DKs are over here like, we want a raid buff past AMZ and grip. Like, come on, guys.
But it's also like dead in spots where other raid buffs aren't. A fight like Sludge Fist is just all physical damage.
Yeah.
And like,
That's like, I think Sludge Fist is the only fight, I think, in the last 4 years where this ability would not be very insane.
Right, and so anything without magic, like if you did a pure physical damage fight, then it's crap, But there's not many there's not many scenarios where that is, where that's the case. So it's usually if it's not great, it's either great, there's really not a place where it's just good, So, but grip's the same way. Grip is either great or you can't use it, basically. So, and why aren't the DKs? Why can't they accept that they are a high variance class when it comes to cooldowns? Like I guess that's what I mean. Like, why do they want lower variance? And that's the whole reason they play DK, is because they have high variance. That when they play DK and they are popping off on all cylinders, and the devs gave them everything in the fight for AMZ to be good, for grip to be good, because they're both going to be OP if when the encounters allow it, basically. They're going to be very OP, and the thing is they're still riding that wave as we go, and that's the issue. Is they have to know that, hey, when your variance goes down, because you're playing a high variance class, when it goes back down, your fun level might go down a little bit too, but during those high moments, they can't be higher. So I get it. It's like the DK is like the super dopamine drop of WoW retail, and like, I get it, but the complaints after a while, after you hear it for 2 decades, or 15 years or so, like you're just like, guys, just learn that you're a high variance class, or play a different low variance class. Play something else that's more, standardized.
and then also like if stacking is bad, although you can always kind of make that work. It's just something that
You only
but
need
then
it to
also,
work.
like,
You only need it to work once every 3 minutes, so you'll find a spot.
then I guess the main thing is just like it really sucks for the M+ side of things for them.
I mean, yeah, for sure, it's worse in Mythic Plus than it was in most scenarios before. But it doesn't address the tank DPS disparity thing, which we talked about last week, because like you just don't need a DPS DK to bring that AMZ. It's just easier.
Well, but you can have 2 DKs, right? Because I mean, AMZ is not unique, so that's something you could stack technically.
Yeah,
it's like
but you play
stacking
2
evoke-
blood DKs, right?
It's like stacking evokers.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. Like every bit of a reason you're bringing an evoker to a raid, by bringing more of them, you are multiplying that reason why you brought them. I mean, you could bring 4 DKs like the last time they had uncapped.
But it's like that because they're high variance. So an evoker is high variance on the utility, of the thing. So if you don't need the utility, you don't bring evokers. It's real simple. If you don't stack, if you're not stacked, or if you're not in a certain raid positioning comp, you don't bring preservation evokers. You just don't. Because if you spread out too much, they suck. They can't do anything, The same thing if you never stack. AMZ sucks. They're high variance classes, okay? And we have to get through the player base, and there's going to be people are going to complain regardless. We have to get through the player bases that you are playing a high variance class, and you have to say that, okay, these cooldowns aren't going to be worth anything this fight if I'm choosing to play this class. You just have to say that to yourself, or play a different class, you know. And so, but complaining to the devs to make your high variance class more standardized or less variance, then it's like what do they do? They're dumbing down the game at that point. They're uniforming. They're making the game more uniform. And so you either agree with like the first half of this conversation, or you agree with the back half of this conversation, because this is where they're at in the balancing issues. So
DMZ. That's what you did the last raid that happened.
Yeah, if their damage is also good and it's just like completely free, and it's like, hey, do we want the spec that does a zillion damage and also brings AMZ? Yes, we want as many of those as we have free spots. So yeah,
right. And then on top of that, we also wanted to do the highest highest DPS possible. Like the wants and the needs off of people that complain off this is like, I want this to be God tier and in S tier always, and it can never be anything else but. You know what I mean? It's like you just can't. That's not how this game is constructed, and you have to step back a little bit. So
it's tough because like even though it's objectively very powerful, I think it should say something when a large majority of the community of a class does not want their spec to be valuable because of something like grip and AMZ, and they just want an actual raid buff.
Yeah, I mean, haven't we been saying the same thing? It's like the only logical solution. Like, it seems like basically if you're a DK player, you see the writing on the wall, they're gonna say, even if they get it right this tier, and grips are fucking great, like P2 of Dementius, or maybe P1 of Dementius and Nexus King, like there's a few potentially very valuable grips. Yeah, but they're just like, okay, well, what happens when they just forget to do that, right? Or if I'm a DPS DK, it's like going to a blood DK because their grip is. But if you give a raid buff, that's just like a permanent solution, right? You'd rather have the thing that every other class has. Makes sense.
Do you think AMZ?
But then again, that takes away from the high of highs. It takes away from being a high variance class, and then when you are good, you are just the alt. That's what Death Knights are. It's so. That's what they're saying, that they don't want that that ultimate feeling when they are the top of the charts and everything's running smooth. They're AMZing, they're gripping, they're doing all these things in raid, and it's meaningful in raid. Okay, but what they're saying is when it's not like that, DK sucks. We know that though. We know that. So so you have a choice. Play something else, or understand, understand that your variance isn't this patch or this dungeon, So, and I know it sucks, but that's really how you have to come about it.
Do you think you would be happy if you were a DK main and the tank DPS discrepancy was fixed and the AMZ was the source of value of the raid buff? Because it is very powerful and it is different than other effects.
Well, does it guarantee a raid spot? Like a Havoc Demon Hunter is guaranteed a raid spot.
Probably guarantees 2.
If you're if you're pulling 90% DPS logs in the majority of guilds, you have a raid spot. You just do. Okay. You do. Now, if you're trying to, and then if you're above that, if you're above, if you're above that threshold, if you're even doing more DPS and you're in a higher level guild, like I don't know, say you're just below Hall of Fame or something like that, I guarantee you're playing more than one class. You're playing 2 more characters probably. I don't think there's a lot of people on the shy end of Hall of Fame that are still getting CE during the season. I don't think that their problem is because I only play DK. I just don't think that's the case at all.
It's better
Shooting
than
is
darkness.
close. Yeah.
But it's
The problem is the 2 that it guarantees right now are heavily weighted towards blood rather than DPS. But if that was fixed, I wonder if it would be one of the things where it's like, okay, this actually is functionally, because like Evoker doesn't have a raid buff, and we still always see them because their utility speed is just valuable enough to be the same type thing, right?
Right, but their utility is variance. Like this is one thing is their Evoker's utility is high variance, but in any situation, like you can go at any raid and you could possibly say, well, the Evokers are going to be better than 2 DKs most of the time because AMZ can be bad, in Evokers too, like that. Like Rescue is always going to do what it does. It's always going to go get somebody and bring them back. So it's always going to be a nice single target positioning tool. Just really, really nice. DK is always going to, hey, if we're stacking here, we're going to drop this AMZ or grip these ads, put them together. So they all have their uses.
If I'm a DK main, I'm not happy until we get a 60-minute raid buff that puts one of us in the raid at all times. That would be my answer.
Yeah.
Do you think Evoker should get one of those?
And what does that do? That is the thing. You're like, what does that do? You're just going to give them a stat stick? Like it's a tough one. Or you take these buffs all away, basically. You either uniform the game, or you take the buffs away, and then make DKs happy because then they get their stat stick and they get their grips and their AMZ. They get everything. Or where, because you go back to this argument is like they can play this high variance, or they can this high variance class, or they can uniform the game to where everybody's the same.
Or do you think that their utility speed is enough?
I believe they have one, right?
sorry, I can't believe I forgot about Blessing of the Bronze. My bad there, yeah.
Yeah.
But nobody brings them because of Blessing of the Bronze.
Raid so
we discussed this.
Yeah.
We discussed this
But
last
it's also
week.
had,
But
it's also had an
every
OP
year,
spec.
Is
every
they don't-
year.
They don't have that.
That is true. This last raid, I don't think Dev was OP in progression until like the farm buffs, and then it got like the version of Evoker right now is crazy. That's not what it was in progression. But yeah, we sat them on a few fights this year, so they were not but not on like an entire raid. They've had every single patch they've had one class that's just completely absurd. Og for like a year after it got released. Prez, dude, I think the most broken one was Flame Shaper Prez, which like I don't know if you guys are paying attention, but like Flame Shaper Prez is I have no idea.
So
how good they are. I wouldn't say anything.
our
It's
tank
like
is
the
too
lot of
handy.
stuff that they nerfed in season 1 for Flame Shaper Prez is like
We'll
unnerved.
see. We'll see how
And
this
they
works
got
out.
6th tier. So we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, although if you're a Prez Evoker, how excited are you hearing that the last boss's arena is the size of Stormwind? You're like, oh no.
It's only for P1. There's no way of saying that the raid will be spread out on that massive platform. Like, do you?
Yeah, but it
in
can't be a good sign.
Maybe. I mean, but P2, like the P2 platform after you Dragon Ride is reasonable, and the last phase shrinks in space like Razageth P3. So that's fine. Like the hardest part of that phase, everyone's going to be in range of you, right? And in P1, you remember the N'Zoth mechanic, where like everyone had to line up, and like you have a little spread thing around you, and everyone can't be stacked on each other, and then it drops a little pool. That exists in P1 as like area denial of you using that whole platform. So there's a couple other mechanics that could maybe make you split or whatever, but you could theoretically do like a stack grade for that platform.
So, how much do you guys know about Dimensius? Like, how much of
Everything.
the arena is actually being used? Because it's supposed to be a massive boss, right?
It's only
So-
P1, and
Yeah.
with the massive boss, the boss is not massive in P3, and you don't fight him in P2. But in P1, you start and you kill him from 100% to 0 in P1.
No, but like how much of the arena are you actually using in that one?
I guess you could assume potentially all of it. I can explain to you how it works, but I don't think our viewers will be very interested in like an explanation of that phase. But I mean, potentially all of it. But the fight seems to. Have you seen Volcaros? Do you remember Volcaros?
Yeah.
Like you would start as a raid, you'd be together, and then like the very first soak would go off, and then you kind of just like moved apart. So you're either going to start in the raid, in the middle, in that phase, and then you're going to split into 2 groups of 10, and by the end of the phase, you're each going to be on each edge, which would mean that you as a player are only going around half the room, but you as a raid are traversing all of it, if that makes sense. Or you could start at the edge and do a reverse Volcaros, or like the end of Volcaros, if that makes sense, and then come together. Or you could find a way to go as a raid fully all the way from left to right. We don't know. I would say it's either Volcaros, P1's movement is like Volcaros, or it's like it's gonna kind of feel like N'Zoth. Like, do you remember? Did you do N'Zoth? Like how you like kind of your raid is like moving from one side to another, and you're moving because you're dropping those things. That it could play out exactly example.
Yeah, it's not. To clarify, it's not actually a Stormwind-sized like P1 platform.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, you're not gonna.
You're on some kind of platform of some size, and then you fly to these 2 Void Lord ads, and then you do P3.
In a different position with him being much smaller. That's not. It's, and also the way the mechanics work out in the phase, you're not like randomly running across like a Stormwind size area. It's just like a regular.
Yeah, that's what I thought it would be.
Yeah,
I'm just
dragon
imagining.
riding across something that size, maybe.
Would that actually be interesting? Like, what if you straight up just had like your entire fucking raid group just split up and you're just beating up parts of Dimensius? Like, you have like a group go to the Mage Quarter, and another one go to Old Town, and another one go to like Dwarven District, and then you just have like Trade District.
There was that fight in Emerald Nightmare that was kind of like that, right? Dragons of Nightmare. Didn't you kind of split your raid?
I kind of remember that. Yeah. Like,
I mean, you get into like those portals.
Yeah, I don't know. At that point, like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, definitely a what are we doing here angle.
Like, you could just go and do 2 different dungeons with your guild at the same time and like talk on voice and have more fun, probably. I think than a fight like that.
Yeah. Fight looks fucking sick though. The raid.
Yeah, it's
the
weird
raid
that the
looks
whole
really
dungeon
cool.
journal. Like, has there been an end boss with? I guess Ansarek's dungeon journal was similarly comprehensive.
The Volcross was the Amandrasil. It was like the 3rd boss. If you went to the left, there's a split. There's a Y. You killed the first 2 bosses, and then if you went to the left, you went through that one, and it was a big worm boss. It's cool.
Even on Mythic, right?
No, I your line of thinking that you're on right now is very correct. It is since you haven't tested end bosses, so it's been a few years. I actually can't remember the last raid boss that we publicly tested. So Sylvanas we did. Like, I remember doing heroic Sylvanas.
That was the last one.
That was the last one? Okay. Yeah, so like since Sylvanas, I've had to look at end bosses in the dungeon journal and be like, this is how we're gonna prepare our whole tier based on your ability to comprehend a dungeon journal. And I would say this is by far the easiest boss to understand by doing that. There's usually like things that just don't quite make sense. Like I remember even on Ansarek, you're reading the P2 like portal mechanic.
Right.
And you're like, okay, like how the fuck are they going to do that? And like initially it wasn't even the way it was now. It was actually only the tanks get ported, and then it's like, okay, well how are you going to deal with that? Like a tank is leaving the platform, like it is very confusing. So I would say, yeah, you're right in that it is right now. I think it is like extremely easy to understand how the mythic end boss is going to play out, and you could like raid plan kind of the whole thing outside of the timings of how things line up together.
Which means that it's basically hard confirmed that there's a secret mythic phase, so that they can still have something that is secret in here. So
There is a 100% chance that there is not a secret phase on this boss. Unfortunately for all of our viewers, there's absolutely no way.
Okay, yeah.
Did you guys know we killed this boss back in TBC?
Yeah.
It was a quest boss.
Yeah.
I did not. Is it, and he's been sitting there just like getting steaming mad the whole time?
Yeah,
Dude.
Yeah. Now he's a big.
He's pissed.
Yeah. Big bench energy for sure. Do you know they did like 4 podcasts in the space of our 1 episode last week?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
crazy. They've been blasting.
Oh, dude, I saw this one comment. Like
Yeah,
UBTV was streaming, and there's one guy that was chatting. It was like, so I'm a fan of Voice of Warcraft and like MBI, yada yada yada. And how is it that I can never escape Tetos? And that's like actually so true. It's like no matter where you go, you will encounter Tetos. So that seems to be kind of the WoW space, where you just like. Like when Drados mentioned the whole breaking meta thing and being involved in it, I'm like, what the fuck? Like, how is everyone just always involved in all these different events, and it's always the same people?
Yeah. Is Tettle still making people mad as hell on there, or what? Is that what that was about?
Yeah, he's been talking about one button.
Oh, dude, their most recent.
So I'm not worried about one button, the one button rotation. I don't think anybody. They're going to tune this thing down. Like right now, they just want to see what they can do with it, you know. So it might do 75% right now, but I have a feeling it'll be like 50%, 55%. I have a feeling it will be set to whatever the median or average DPS is for a class. I have a feeling. Like I have a feeling, which might be. You know, it's going to be, so basically it's going to hit like 50 percentile, maybe 40 percentile, maybe on the up curve, because you shouldn't be rewarded for one button rotation. Okay, you just shouldn't. There should just be, it should be baseline. So
Recent one was about the one button thing being bad for the game, which
that's kind of
it's only bad. It's only bad because it's going to be a troll thing. Because once the numbers come out to what actually, like what percentile is the one button thing, people are just going to get trolled out of their mind. Like, you know, I can just hear it now.
Because like, so I don't know if you guys saw, but one button rotation is actually insane on Boomkin.
yeah,
I was pugging an 18 key with Boomkin one button rotation, and I was actually destroying this Frost PK and Arcane Mage. Like they stood no chance. We should have just been doing the one button rotation too. It's actually really powerful, and it actually kind of opened my eyes. Like when I was playing with the one button rotation, the game actually turned out to be so much more simple than I initially made it out to be, or like how a lot of people like envision World of Warcraft, right? Because when you're thinking of WoW, you think of like all these complex mechanics and rotations and all that. But when you don't have the rotation part of the game where you're just hitting one button, I can just like my cognitive load is
isn't that
like
a good
so
thing?
free and open. I mean, yeah, it's kind of cool. It's kind of like eye-opening in a way where it's like, man, the game actually isn't that hard. It's just when you
the thing that you're
combine all
the
these
thing
things.
the part that you turned
yeah, but you
off
turn off half the game.
is the hard part while doing that.
No, he turned off his brain. That's what happened. He was able to do other things. He's going to just smash the one button, and and then we just sat back here, and we're like, okay, well, it's turning into classic. You know, they're giving the classic experience in retail, and that's not what retail's about. So.
Now with everything else, but yeah, it's almost like if people want to become shot callers in Mythic Plus, and you're a Moonkin player, just like fucking have someone throw on the one button rotation, just have someone like be the best shot caller of all time. Now Rain is freed up.
Yeah, I do think it's fair to say that's probably a bad thing.
Oh yeah,
Like,
yeah.
if the right move for a key group is to have your shot caller play
Especially
one
like a
button.
high key group, like the
Yeah.
people at the bleeding edge.
I think this will be half and half. Like the one button rotation will be an oh shit button. An oh shit button. I don't know what to press, so I'm gonna sit here and I'm gonna press the oh shit button because hitting the oh shit button is better hitting than no button at all. This is, and I've been saying this for a very long time, that it'll be accompanied on everyone's bar, because at some point, it's kind of like chess, like cheating at chess. If you've ever seen people that cheat at chess, don't cheat every move. They just cheat one move 25 moves into the game that gives them a slight advantage to where the rest of their game goes smooth. And they can now see they needed one move that was so advantageous that all the lines opened up. And everything opened up. That is what one button is. So
If things like
just remember, you heard it here first.
taking that kind of a damage reduction, like that's pretty bad. Like the thing is, like we were thinking about this for
This
splits
tank-
too. It's
this
like,
tank
okay, like,
has,
you can take a list of specs where the one button rotation is actually good. And like I am almost positive that if we can't force anyone to do anything, we're like, hey guys, we would actually. It'd be beneficial to all of us if you guys just threw on that one button rotation real quick if you play this, and this, and this, and just
Right.
like be more aware, because like these, I mean, obviously like they're seeing the raid for the first time, so they're just like turbo dying to everything
Right.
on harder bosses. I mean, that would make our thing more efficient, right? And I mean, you could boil that down to the rest of the game to where
Right. And this is another thing is you can go into situations and you can run an instance or something with one button. And you can kind of see, if you're not using raid bots, if you're not simming, I think people don't do their homework and they don't sim all the time. So this is like in-game homework, basically. They don't have to worry about anything. They don't have to worry about external add-ons. Do I think simming will ever go away? I don't really see a reason why it would. But if they are planning to take that one button is a good... If you can guarantee that one button will always be 40% of your DPS or 60% of your DPS, then one button is a really, really good indicator if nothing else is available. So, but because they're keeping logs and they're keeping Raider IO alive for now, obviously we don't really know. Know the lifespan on that, but we can probably guarantee for the next 5 years that Raider IO will still be around and Warcraft logs will still be here. So, I'm going to hedge that they'll be here in 5 years.
or if people, we said this before, like kind of the only downside of that one button rotation is if people who want to have fun playing the game feel like they are either pressured to or feel like they have to use it for either performance gains or to not be a burden to people. And
Yeah, but in what scenario, like if you're getting week 2 AOTC or week 4 AOTC, I don't think this affects you at all very much. And it may affect more people than I want to admit, basically. Like, because I think people will use it for like a poll or two just to see if they're doing the right thing. But as just a kind of in-game judge, like I said. So.
that interaction is.
But will it
really
take
shitty.
away, like
If
if
that
you
ends
go
up
into
happening,
a
looks like it
brand,
certainly could.
if you go into a brand new boss and you one button for the first 5 polls as a group, okay, we're gonna go in here the first 5 buttons, because then you can just worry about mechanics. You don't really have to worry about your rotation. But I feel like that's detrimental as well, But I think it's when the chaos gets too much for people to do their actual rotation, which is the game in general. Like the whole game is to do your rotation and move and do everything you need to do. But when the game gets so convoluted and so chaotic, you're gonna sit there and you're gonna resort to your one button rotation button and then do the movement or do the mechanic and then go back until your cooldowns are back up, because it doesn't spam cooldowns. It doesn't do that, but you're not talking. And when you're worried about survivability, you're not necessarily going to hit cooldowns. Right? You're going to hit defenses, but you're not going to be worried about your offensive cooldowns or anything like that. So that's what I think this is. I think it's a little cheat sheet within the game that'll also give you X amount of DPS, but you know, I think if you use this 2 or 3 cooldowns within an instant or raid boss instance, I think it could help your DPS immensely. I just thinking, but using this all the way forward, no, not so much.
And I don't know if it will, but if that becomes widespread, they would definitely need to do something about that.
Yeah, I think the good news is like there's room to nerf it a little for the specs that's true for, and still have it be like that feeling of calm and this game isn't actually that overwhelming, and have that be true for the people that actually want to opt into it without making it, you know, a damage gain or
because there is good. It's not exclusively negative. Like there's people who actually, it turns out, they don't care about being good at this game, and if all they could do is just press the one button and not be a burden, that is like the best news they've heard in forever.
Yeah, now there are also people who want to do top damage while pressing one button.
Right. Well, there's both exists, of course, but I think this is more of a taking people off the floor rather than bringing people down from the ceiling. So, like, if you want to be at the top of the ceiling, if you want to be the high parser, you need to do your homework. You know, there's no better way. But if you're just trying to get off the floor and do normal, and the raid on normal, something, even LFR, and have some general sense of what's going on, then I think this is really good.
Button. And I do think that they and I can't be happy at the same time, but
I mean, that
I
just
think most people should be able to be happy at the same time with this thing.
I want to see him take it one step further. Just have 0 button rotation, where like it just auto does your rotation.
You just
I mean, it could be tiring just hitting back.
Is that what you experienced in that key?
Oh yeah. I was just like, I was just like super locked in on Weak X. I was doing a floodgate, and I'm just looking at, all right, the shred in there is about to do the thing, and then I was like just staring at that bar the entire time while hitting my R key rapidly, and
Well,
I was just able to like.
Just find it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No, yeah, you could. Yeah. That's what.
Is the in-game
Big
auto
thought
hotkey still bad?
In-game? What do you mean?
The one where you like hold the button down and it keeps casting the same thing.
Yeah, I just know that it is inferior to actually using auto hotkey. I just don't know if they made it better.
I don't.
It's
I'm
one
not
of
a
that.
user.
What was that thing?
There's like a mode you can make it so if you hold down one, it just keeps.
Yeah.
casting
So what auto hotkey? No, I mean, yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
Of course. Yeah, I mean, so all it does is like what auto hotkey does is it's a program, and if you're holding the 2 thing on your keyboard, what it's actually doing is just spamming 2, but you just don't have to like keep spamming your key. It's not a DPS increase or anything like that. It's like purely just what you prefer. And they built that into WoW, but I know like auto hotkey users are like they're like, oh great, I don't have to use auto hotkey anymore, but it's just like worse. It just doesn't work as well. I just don't, but that was when it came out. I don't know if they fixed that, so I brought it up.
Bro, I'm just like imagining in the Race to World first, someone using the 1 button rotation. That fucking own.
There's no way. Unless
Splits,
it not it is still a damage loss. Like you're saying, it's good for Moonkin.
Loss, yeah.
But like you as a Moonkin not using it, I mean,
100%. Yeah.
I mean, there's absolutely.
I was doing like 8 mil overall when I could probably be doing 10 mil instead. So.
I mean, yeah.
Do you think something like the hunter kicking the coins on Bandit?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like someone
who's in something like Race to World first, because like.
This is what I'm getting at. Is there's these scenarios that you have to be so focused on doing that you literally can't do your rotation because you're worried about movement and positioning, and because these things have to be done or it's a raid wipe, and they have to be done perfectly because they're vector, like the coins on one arm Bandit, or they're vector placements, so you have to like point them in the right direction in front of your raid, and your raid knows they're coming. So, but to do that, you have a very limited amount of time. During that time, you're not really DPSing because you have to aim. You have to aim and kind of, you're using a different part of your brain basically, and that's where I'm getting at is when you're doing it and you're that focused on doing the thing, this one button rotation is really going to help.
No, because the hunter is already basically doing that by playing their spec by
True, yeah,
default.
Beastmaster Hunter. That's fair.
I mean, seriously, especially like
Yeah.
current BM. Yeah, but no, I never. I mean,
So what Max just said is we put a BM hunter in that position to do the coins, and the reason why is because their pet damage is doing 75% or whatever damage of their DPS, total of their DPS. So we understand that there's a mitigation there loss, that the one button rotation needs not to exist because of that. Like we understand the loss, we took the loss, and what we did was we just played the class around it, which that's great if you had Beastmaster Hunters, a plethora of Beastmaster Hunters to take over that role, but how many raids have that many hunters, for that specific scenario? So you're fixing you're trying to uniform a problem, but it doesn't really fix it in this case. Just the age old, just pick the right class actually fixes it better.
and you mentioned like you're doing 8 mil instead of 10 mil. Like if you're doing like 9.7 mil, that isn't good enough to be doing this. You know what I mean? In that like relative scenario. So I mean, like there's no way you'd ever use it.
Yeah, I mean, for a good chunk of players, though, that's super worth
Right.
doing. In fact, I think you could straight up get to like title keys, and you could easily get cutting edge by using this. In fact, I think a lot of people would be surprised by how much better this would be than them actually playing the game.
I don't know if I agree with that statement. I'll have to think about that.
Because it is pretty insane. Like
It
it
does
is
depend on your
low-key
spec,
insane.
right? Like there are some specs where it griefs. I think like the mage
Yeah,
specs,
of course,
for
some
instance,
specs are
is pretty
terrible,
bad on,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And like,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's also
It
kind
is-
of lame.
It is bad for a few people, but I did think about like specific Blizzard negativity. I had someone come in my chat and they're like, dude, they never fix stuff going into a patch. And I'm like, I feel like the way you're looking at it is like you never think about something actually getting fixed. You're just like, when things don't get fixed, it's whatever. And then when it's fixed, it's like, okay, that's how it should have been. So like the one button rotation, people were like, oh dude, Blizzard's gonna be so fucking dog shit at this. Like this shit's gonna suck. The rotations are gonna be bad. And now like the other complaints I were hearing was like, this is too good. And it's like the Blizzard like can't win.
Yeah.
You know, it's like it's never like okay or
Yeah,
working.
this
It's
tank
either
isn't
like bad in one
very
direction or bad in the other.
tanky.
20-year-old game problems.
I mean, to be fair, it is really hard to make like a one-button rotation that will actually be
Compete.
satisfying for the community. It's either
Yeah.
too good or too
I
bad.
mean, I agree with that. Like you're uniforming this. Like I said, you're turning this into something it's not meant to be. And that's the issue. So I do agree with that last statement that it's hard to turn the one button rotation into fun because you're turning it so uniform. You're turning it into the classic experience, what the classic experience was built for, and what it's good for. And you're trying to take that into retail, and that's you're mixing apples and oranges, and it doesn't work.
Bad like most of the times, and it's kind of hard to like have the fine line.
I need to go back and look at what that question was.
Hunter kicking the coins on Bandit.
Yeah,
Could
exactly.
ever be
Like
using
someone
it
who
in
just
something like Race to World First, because like.
No, because the hunter is already basically doing that by playing their spec by
True, yeah,
default.
Beastmaster Hunter. That's fair.
I mean, seriously, especially like
Yeah.
current BM. Yeah, but no, I never. I mean, you mentioned like you're doing 8 mil instead of 10 mil. Like if you're doing like 9.7 mil, that isn't good enough to be doing this. You know what I mean? In that like relative scenario. So I mean, like there's no way you'd ever use it.
Yeah, I mean, for a good chunk of players, though, that's super worth
Right.
doing. In fact, I think you could straight up get to like title keys, and you could easily get cutting edge by using this.
Okay, Dorky says this. Okay, At what eye level in what week are we saying this at? This is a dependent statement, okay? And like, okay, so the one button rotation, it can get me DPS numbers to get CE. CE week 1. CE week 15. Like, I could see one button rotation getting me CE week 20. But the problem with getting CE isn't the numbers at week 20. Okay, it's organization, it's personal responsibility, it's good raid leading, it's good call outs, but one thing that's not week 20 is numbers. Like, everybody should be able to have the numbers. I would like to see personally, like, if that should be the goal technically, though, that at the very, very end of the I do like it from a dev and an game engineer position. I really, really like that. I like that the one button rotation at the end of the season, like week 20, is good enough to get CE at the very end of the season, or at least do good enough to get there. But this is why I think, this is why I believe that the one button rotation will be used sparingly. Like, there's going to be these parts where you don't know your rotation, or you can't do it. That's what I think. I think you're going to be able to get out these itty bitty pieces of DPS because of it. So the rest of the problem, but that's assuming everything else is perfect, okay? That the DPS is just there. But like I said, at week 15, DPS is not the problem. The problem is people being able to think about the game and do what they have to do. Like, just be good raiders, be good players, and then having the raid leaders to do everything. Like, there's other issues. That's what I'm getting at.
In fact, I think
So I guess I agree that the devs, I agree that the devs should start from that and work its way back. I agree that's where the one button rotation should start. However, you're not, by claiming that you will be able to get CE solely based on the DPS numbers from the one button rotation is a long shot, and you're it's too much. Like, there's so many other variables there, so especially just one button rotation doesn't help healing at all, really. So you also have to have competent healers. You have to have competent cooldown usage, healer cooldown usage. Like there's so much more, and then are these people even geared? So, and we're talking, and I'm not even talking like getting CE on the final boss. Okay, I'm talking about like where the normal raider gets hung up, which is 3 to 4 bosses into the raid. Okay, so if you're 3 of 8 or 4 of 8, as the majority of raiders will be at this, you're telling me that at a certain point the one button rotation is going to get us through, and it's just not. I don't see that.
a lot of people would be surprised by how much better this would be than them actually playing the game, because it is pretty insane. Like,
it does
is
depend on
low-key
your spec,
insane.
right? Like, there are some specs where it griefs. I think like the mage specs,
of course,
for
some specs
instance,
are
is pretty
terrible.
bad on,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And like,
The-
yeah.
That's also
It
kind
is-
of lame.
It is bad for a few people, but I did think about like specific Blizzard negativity. I had someone come in my chat and they're like, dude, they never fix stuff going into a patch. And I'm like, I feel like the way you're looking at it is like you never think about something.
Want to do Patreon question now? And see
Sure.
see where we're at after?
Yeah.
All right. This week's Patreon question comes in from Cookie, and it says, "Hello, Pod Lads. With the announcement of 11.2 and the Void Demon Hunter speculation currently, what is a new class or spec that y'all have designed or thought of? For a few years, I've had a physical ranged Demon Hunter spec in my head that'd be themed around the Night Elf Wardens. Dragonflight Season 3 had the Wardens reconcile with mages. That kind of didn't mean anything or go anywhere, and I thought that would have been a better storyline to reconcile with Demon Hunters in the creation of the new spec. Are there any other classes with potential for a new spec? If so, which? PodBuy from Australia.
I mean, this is speculative. This is speculatory. Do we really want another physical, do we want another physical damage dealer, like a hunter? Do we need that in the game? We have a bunch of magic damage range, so, getting a ranged demon hunter isn't bad. The third spec to be that, I said this in the last video, I would like Demon Hunter to get a balance. Basically, to have one kind of M plus spec and have one raid spec. I would like that to happen. But yeah, it would be kind of cool if you gave them more ranged abilities. So.
Okay, so they've sent in a lore reason one. Are there any gameplay based or lore based or anything like that specs that either of you have, envisioned? Because I suspect a lore based spec is maybe too much to ask for.
I've never thought of this once.
Yeah.
Okay, for me, a lore-based spec would be like a mana tank, sort of like a spellbreaker. Like with spellbreaker and
like from Warcraft 3 again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With where you kind of manage your mana and survive in sort of some sort of I'm not even sure how it would play exactly, but it would probably be very similar to Blood Decay, I would imagine. Where kind of your resource is your HP bar.
Huh.
That sounds cool.
Yeah, for tanking, that theme is so fun gameplay wise. Anything like Blood Decay is just the go. I would say for DPS, I would definitely want some kind of really high risk, high reward spec. This can't exist in WoW for an obvious reason, but I'm talking Surrender to Madness or maybe the most OP version of Breath of Sindragosa or whatever, where it's it's actually so fucking hard to do it, but if you pull it off, you're just actually gonna beat everyone. And that can't be in the game because then everyone's mad if you can't do exactly this thing and it's not tuned and balanced. But do
you know about how Blue Mage works in Final Fantasy?
Yeah.
It's it's a class that you can only play in non-serious stuff, and it's just kind of an RPE or spec basically, where
you can
get,
choose your abilities
and stuff. And yeah, I think something like that for WoW would be really cool. Although obviously, instead of a talent tree that you build or things, I think that could be sick.
Yeah,
but that's not really a new spec. That's a new class.
Speaking of high skill capped DPS, I was thinking something like Invoker in Dota. You guys know what that is?
Ooh.
No.
Yeah.
It's where you mix and match elements, and you have so basically Invoker only has 4 different abilities. It's a MOBA, right? Dota. So, but with those 4 abilities, you can combine up to 30 something different spells. So if you put Fire and Ice, you get something, or Fire and Earth, you get something else.
Oh yeah, they did this in last Epoch too.
Yes.
There's a class just like.
Want to do Patreon question now?
So basically, the Patreon question talked about a new class, basically. And it talked about a new Demon Hunter class. Do we really want another ranged physical class like a hunter? I don't know. I really think Demon Hunter needs to get split because I think the single target, I think they're having problems balancing it out between single target and AoE. I think they need to split those and have an M plus class and have a raid class, basically what they want the class to do, and just stick with that, basically. The next thing is
maybe too much to ask for
I've never thought of this once.
Yeah.
Okay, for me, a lore-based spec would be a mana tank. sort of like a spell breaker.
Yeah.
You know,
They talk about Spellbreaker, like Spirit Breaker kind of thing. Like, it's more of a supporty kind of. It wasn't really a tank. It kind of was, but I could see it being a tank. But then you're talking about like. My main point on this was that you're talking about classes that would have been, or like if Evoker was in there.
like the Spellbreaker and
Yeah, like from Warcraft 3 again.
Warcraft.
So we'll let
Yes.
this
With
kind
like,
of go.
like where you kind of like manage your mana and survive in sort of some sort of like. Yeah, I'm not even sure how it would play exactly, but it would probably be very similar to Blood Decay, I would imagine, where kind of like your resource is your HP bar.
Huh.
That sounds
I
pretty
mean,
cool.
yeah, for tanking, like that theme is so fun gameplay wise. Anything like Blood Decay is just like the go.
Okay.
I would say like for DPS, I would definitely want some kind of really high risk, high reward spec. This can't exist in WoW for like an obvious reason, but I'm talking like Surrender to Madness or like maybe the most OP version of Breath of Syndragosa or whatever, where it's like it's actually so fucking hard to do it, but if you pull it off, you're just actually gonna beat everyone. And that can't be in the game because then everyone's mad if you can't do exactly this thing and it's not tuned and balanced. But that I'm okay with that because I don't care, right? That would be what I want.
Right. It's one of these other things that it's pulling the things away from the competitive scene and going more non-competitive or casual. So there's an instinctual problem with that. There's like, who are you going to cater to? Are you going to cater, like, to me, classic is the more non-competitive area of WoW. Retail is the competitive scene for me. Is like, how much are you actually going to pull from that? You know, how are you? You know, I think there's more issues than there's more issues on that than you would ever, like, from a dev's point of view. But giving us a class that doesn't do anything in a competitive environment, what does that do? Yeah, we might play it, but Max just said, we really don't care because it's in a non-competitive environment. We don't, we might play it. It might be cool, might be fun, but at the end of the day, it falls into line with the classes and specs that could have been. Okay, so in Classic, we had Protection Paladin, Ret Paladin, no Shaman tank, like Shadow Priest isn't up there. Like, there's so many things that Classic couldn't do because of balancing issues. So I could see all these things being balanced in like a Classic Plus scenario, to where I think the game is going, but to where we can start to work these things back in that basically were left off in 2012 because of everything that the companies were going through at that time. So, and I understand why all that happened, and there's disputes, and I'm sure there's infighting and everything like that. But, so like you go back into this kind of like, well, this is what WoW should have been kind of era, where I think in 4 years after Midnight, after the Last Titan and whatever, I think that's where we're going with this. I think WoW is going to turn into what WoW should have been, rather than what WoW is. Okay, and you can either be, well, it should have been that way all the time, or you can be like, about time, or you can be just happy that it finally became what it should have been. And I think we're going to get that from a lore standpoint and from a gameplay standpoint as well.
Do you know about how Blue Mage works in Final Fantasy?
Yeah.
It's like it's a class that you can only play in non-serious stuff, and it's just like kind of an RP or spec, basically, where
You can like
get,
choose your
class
abilities.
and stuff, and yeah.
Okay. So the Invoker spec is you have three keys, and basically you have one basic ability. You play these keys, and then you invoke, and invoke gives you like a new spell. So most character or heroes in Dota have four spells, 3 normal spells and an ultimate. Okay, well, the 3 spells do different things for Evoker. Basically, there's Quaz, Wex, and Exhort. Basically, in different combinations of these, there's 9 different combinations for these different for Quaz, Wex, and Exhort. And as you do that, you then evoke, and then you gain a new ability, basically. And I understand why this would be impossible to on the it'd be impossible to balance, because the amount of key input, the amount of micro that would go into this would be, you would have to pay somebody off to be able to actually do it. You know what I mean? That would be really, really good. And to be competitive, I understand the balancing like turmoil that would occur basically for this, because the people that play Evoker and micro that well, they're on a different level. They're playing a different game, and they should be rewarded for that. So it would be cool, but as a game, like as a competitiveness game part of the game, it really doesn't make much of a difference if we can't play at a competitive level.
I think something like that for WoW would be really cool. Although obviously it would be a bunch of design time for something that wouldn't matter for me at all. Really, well,
right. Which it doesn't matter, but it fits more of a Classic Plus leveling kind of thing.
No.
It fits more in a Classic Plus mode. And that's what everybody kind of has to kind of see and look past, is this is for the leveling experience. This is for everything Classic was built upon. And that's what I mean when this is what WoW should have been if everything didn't happen the way it did. So
I guess I would engage with it, but it wouldn't matter for like high-end gameplay at all, right? But if they made like a Tinker that had different inventions and stuff, and it's like, yeah, you can't use this in raid, but it's just for delving and outdoor world stuff, and like,
right. But there should be, the thing is what WoW should have been is, I hope these things fall into a Classic Plus scenario someday, to where this is, because Tinker is a big part of it. It's cool, it's fun, it levels up the engineering profession. And then Evoker levels up the enchanting profession. Like, there's so much lore that they just never were able to put in this game. There's more things going on than the player base would ever want to know or need to know. You know,
Farm and Mog or those kind of things, and you just have like 400 different inventions or whatever instead of a talent tree that you build or things. I think that could be sick.
Yeah,
But
yes.
that's not really
Speaking
a
of
spec.
high-
so it's like fan service basically. If they can go 2 ways with it. They can actually balance it, which I think, like I said, I think it just fits better in the Classic realm. But they can either make it competitive in one way or another, or they can make it like a subtype or something, or make the lore about it or something. They can do something like that, or they can just make it in like Classic Plus and then streamline it the whole way, which would be cool.
City Glass.
Speaking of high skill capped DPS, I was thinking something like Invoker in Dota. You guys know what that is?
Ooh.
No.
Yeah.
It's where you mix and match elements, and you have like, so basically Invoker only has 4 different abilities. It's a MOBA, right? Dota. So, but with those 4 abilities, you can combine up to like 30 something different spells. So like, if you put like Fire and Ice, you get something, or like Fire and Earth, you get something else.
Oh,
And-
yeah. They did this
yeah.
in last Epoch, too.
Yes,
There's a
this
class
is
just
the-
like this.
The best,
Yeah,
the
and-
most fun class by far, design-wise, in Last Epoch.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah, that shit's pretty awesome. Arcana in Lost Ark is something similar to this too, where like you draw 2 cards and they have different effects. So depending on what cards you get, you will play your skills differently. Like one might empower this ability, or one might be like a stacking buff. And I think that's like really cool. It's like super high level, or high skill capped gameplay, but it's super rewarding if you can pull it off. It's probably too hard though for World of
Yeah,
Warcraft.
the problem is all the specs that those words have been true for in the game's history are like, like Legion Outlaw Rogue or all these specs where people are like, this is way too complicated. I need 7 weak auras to track all the different things that can happen to me, and like, the game is
Yeah, they're
too
fucking
complicated.
goated though.
Yeah,
There's a reason they exist. There's also a reason that they were removed, but
Yeah.
I'm here for the reason that they existed.
hell yeah.
It is super insane though, those types of classes.
I would also say Frostfire Mage. Like whenever I play any random game, like any game, like if I'm doing a fucking like a sponsored stream of some shitty game that I'm never gonna play again, but like I'm choosing my class on it, and they have some kind of Frostfire Mage. Like I know there's a hero talent for that right now in the game, but like I just feel like the weaving of Frost and Fire as a class is just like super fucking cool. More on the lore side, actually, which you probably wouldn't expect from me here, but like any class that's built like that, like an actual mage spec, like I would play the shit out of that. I just love that.
Yeah, same actually. I think Torchlight Infinite has one of those, and that was the one.
Immediately
That's the one that I jumped to.
Well,
Yeah.
I apologize for calling it a shitty game, but like that's literally the one that came up in my head.
Yeah.
That's a crazy guess.
I mean,
Yeah.
I guess it wouldn't be too crazy because like there hasn't been that many games I've played with like an exact Frostfire character. I mean, there was one. It was actually a sponsor deal that we got back as Limit, and like this was like 7 years ago, and this really random like mobile MMO called, I think it was like World of Kings.
Oh my god. Was that the one that you and me did the dungeon in?
It might have been, yeah.
I think I remember doing a dungeon with like you.
Was it
Like
maybe?
Nagura,
That was a
like-
different game that was very
Okay.
similar. But like, okay, so when we were playing that game, I was doing it with one other person who actually did do that other game with me, and I was saying the whole time, I was like, dude, this game is exactly like, and I was referring to World of Kings. So you played basically World of Kings, but like when I played like actual World of Kings, it was like, dude, I'm so down. I'm like playing this character. I just have to play a Frostfire Mage. I'm immediately drawn to it.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, Frostfire Mage this patch, Frost Mage has fucking Ignite. It's crazy. And it's good. That sounds so cool.
Yeah, some of the set bonuses look. Again, we talked about it in the last episode as well, but there are some bangers, and a lot of not bangers, but there are some real bangers. The mage ones. I mean, it's always the mage ones, but like
Yeah.
most of the mage ones look great as per usual.
Yeah, so I played around with it a little bit more. I mean, I guess like actually getting to play in content for today for the first time, and it's kind of cool when you have one of your abilities just pop off. Because you know how last week I was saying how these hero talents are just gonna, or these what should we call it? Tier sets
The new
are
set
gonna just
bonuses,
double down. Yeah, the tier set bonuses are just gonna double down on your hero talent, and it's already doing a large chunk of your damage, but it actually feels really good if you're playing something like Colossus and you hit your Demolish and your Demolish actually pops off. It kind of gives off that classic feeling of like when you hit your button, you feel it doing something. Because that's like something retail has lacked for the longest time, where it's like, all right, you hit your buttons and you don't really feel it. It's kind of just like...
Yeah, because retail's inflated and the game design has pushed it into a different direction. That's why. Like, the reason why classic is so cool is because, and so fun, is because your per global cooldown, there's more on every global cooldown, like, and than in retail, basically. So there's more strategy behind it. There's more everything. Every global cooldown in now, obviously, at the race to world first level, very high keys, they're also going to be like that. But there's in classic, you don't have many room. Like, there's not much room for mistakes. Okay, there's just not. It's strategic, and it has a lot to do with the tank. And I understand some of these ideals like go both ways. They applied retail and classic, but That's why I think this is why you're getting a diminishing. You're getting so many more globals during an encounter, during in retail, that it feels like there's diminishing return, because there is, literally. So
Like one of your buttons that you're supposed to be putting on cooldown, or something that you're supposed to just maintain. But yeah, like it's kind of like a beefy feeling when you just have one thing doing so much damage.
Interesting. Yeah, my guess was that I was not going to enjoy like moving demolish from one global that does 20% of my damage to one global that does 30% of my damage, but I know you also thought that, and then if you're saying it's if it actually is like somehow moving it to a spot where it's better now.
I wouldn't say that for all specs, but like for some it is kind of stupid. Like for prop paladin right now, hammer and anvil is like literally half your damage, and I don't think it's healthy for the game.
That's the lightsmith one.
Yeah.
Anything that makes me play lightsmith instead of templar on prop paladin, I'm immediately against. I hate it.
Yeah, that's fair.
All right. What other stuff you guys want to talk about? I think we've covered most of the 11.2 stuff now.
Do we want to look at these interview stuff? I know Max already looked at it on stream.
Oh yeah, there was
anything that's like worth talking about.
There was that interview.
Oh yeah,
we looked at some of the. I think we looked at one question of it in the last episode.
Yeah, I read through it. There was some like half the questions are like pretty whatever, and then they give an obvious very whatever answer to it, but there was actually a few that were pretty interesting.
Okay.
Let me find it. Oh, okay, here's one. So the question was, and we may have even talked about this last week, but I don't know if we looked at their answer. We saw dungeon complexity difficulty decrease last season, which led to a lot of players having more fun. Recently, we've seen feedback that Mythic raid is getting harder and less fun due to ever-increasing complexity. Any plans to do a complexity decrease for the raid in Season 3? He gives a bunch of responses here, and the one that I find interesting is they're like, okay, there's like things that you have to do. You have to, there's difficulty that can come from your ability to control your character. Dodge lasers, pick up bombs, carry them from place to place. There's difficulty that can come from how much time and effort you dedicated to your character's gear. There's difficulty that can come from how good your strategy and your ability to collaborate with other players is. And then they say, I think we may try to pull slightly back on the first of those, the twitchiness of gameplay. That I think is a place where we'd like to take rating overall in the future, is a place where it's a little bit more about strategy and your ability to play your character at a very high level. And he mentioned something about like Naxxramas, the Hygen dance. You know, that stuff like that isn't going anywhere, but we feel like specifically dodge mechanics have gone too far. And then I was thinking like of things that people don't like about Mythic Raid. Like what are bosses that are like really majorly defined by dodge mechanics? Like Rashok's
Kaiveza, isn't it?
Rashok's one of them, banger. Kaiveza's one of them,
Rashok.
banger. Denathrius entirely defined by Massacre. That I think when I read that I was perplexed, because I feel like those aren't mechanics. The bosses that are the most majorly defined by that mechanic they want to make easier are ones that people actually really like.
I think it depends on how you like. You could also look at it as like 3-second Tindral Seeds, 0-second Ansarek Web Blades that are just like.
The Ansarek Web Blades are an example of that being bad, but like Tindral Seeds are a totally different thing, right?
Well, there's
it's still
strategy and heuristics and stuff to that, but then when it's 3 seconds, there's also like you just need to be under the age of 25 or whatever to be good at that mechanic, or grandfathered in if you've been raiding forever or whatever,
Yeah, I mean, I do remember saying at the beginning of this patch specifically where there's like too many swirlies nowadays. I don't know if it was just amplified because of the visual changes or because of.
You mean like the Gallywix one where you're running out and there's just like 700 swirlies you can see?
Yeah, there's just like little swirlies, and then there's.
Although
also
that's not actually hard to dodge. Like the reason that's hard to dodge isn't because you're failing a reaction check; it's because you're like cutting each other off.
Right, but I mean, it's not so much the time required to dodge these swirlies. It's more so the abundance of swirlies, and it can get really annoying if you're playing a caster. Kind of like Carnage of whatever the hell it's called.
Yeah.
The second boss. Like that fight.
Where you just like you feel.
Yeah,
like
it's just like swirlies all over fucking place, and that's kind of obnoxious.
Yeah, I don't know. I would agree with you, Max, that like dodging is usually pretty fun. Like it's usually a pretty fun mechanic, but I do think that the level of reaction time that has been tested by some of the hardest Mythic bosses over the past couple of years. Like, even Fire-Act Blazes before they slowed those down, Tendril Seeds before they slowed those down, Anshark Webblades before they slowed those down. All of those were like...
Well, Anshark Webblades wasn't about slowing down. I think the biggest issue with that was
Also
just
telegraphing,
the
yeah.
animation was just terrible.
But even without that, like when there was the four
The
per
extra
set,
one?
and there was the one in so in P3 you would get like web blades, dodge balls, web blades again, right? That one, that spot where you got like 2 web blades within 15 seconds. They cut one of those out of the fight, but for a while there was that spot there where you're just like, you are just in a bullet hell, 15-second section of the fight, which I don't know. I think on those fights in particular, it did get a little bit more Twitch reaction emphasis than would be good, than that would be like ideal.
I was thinking like class gameplay is more twitchy nowadays than ever before. That's like a bigger
like just playing your
issue, if I were
rotation.
to say. Yeah, I mean, it kind of depends on what class you play. Like, Outlaw Rogue or something like that in particular, it would be like a higher APM spec.
Okay.
Some specs are pretty high APM.
I think that's good though, because you don't have to play them. Like there are
Like
specs
having
that
some
aren't.
high APM specs.
Yeah,
is
I
good,
mean,
yeah.
there's specs in this game that are easy. There are specs that are harder, and there are specs that are slow, and there are specs that are fast. I think all of those things are good.
I agree. But what they're talking about is not just a diversified game, but they're talking about high variability as well, like we were talking about earlier. Like at some point, these differences are very good for game, and the balance becomes within the imbalance, which is, it's always weird to say it like that, but it's truth. So.
Yeah, I mean, that is fair, yeah. So I have a question for you guys. What kind of mechanics would you say are good and bad in Raid?
I don't even know if you can classify as like the types of mechanics really, unless you want to talk about like very specific way bosses work. Like I mean, one that I would always cherry pick is just like I just find bosses where they're very rare, where you can like kind of choose how the boss is going to do things, like the Lei Shen style. Like that mechanic I think is really cool. But in general, like you're talking about like dodges versus holding bombs versus whatever. Like I think any mechanic, and I think there's examples of basically every kind of mechanic they've made that are really good, and how twitchy or whatever the requirement is just about how much or how little time they get it to. And it's not like just make everything slower. There are mechanics that if you made them too slow or too easy, it just mean completely nothing to you. The best bosses are ones where it's challenging enough but fair, and you actually feel rewarded for learning how to do it right.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's any specific mechanic. It's just, it's gonna sound really stupid, but like pretty much every kind of mechanic can be good if they just make it good.
And I think much, like they have an answer in one of these questions that's basically the same thing, right? Where it's like, yeah, we like all of these. All of these are an important part of a balanced breakfast. I definitely agree with that as well. I think my personal favorites are the ones, any mechanic where it is both punishing, but also you can recover and adapt to things going a little bit away from plan. Like those are my favorite kind of mechanics where you can save the raid by having somebody make a good backup or something like that. And there are some fights where that's not really possible, and those ones are kind of less. Those fights tend to be less fun for me, where it's just like, yeah, everybody has to do exactly their assigned job, and if one person dies or has something weird happen to them, there's no way for anybody else to save it. It's just over.
Yeah.
So I have a mechanic I don't like. It's the ones where only some people get assigned to do these jobs. Like kind of like One-Armed Bandit, the person who does the coin, right? The one where you have to somebody has to do a job and they basically have to lose damage doing it. I find those to be kind of lame.
Yeah, but the problem with that is you get into where like jailer stuff. You have 3 seconds to uphold this formation, or you wipe. So yeah. So it's like I don't. It has to be balanced, and like what else is there, kind of thing. Like that's the other thing about this is what else is there?
They don't happen as much nowadays. But
I mean, those are like is basically bringing disc priest barrier, same cooldown, almost the same DR. I mean, that's fucking insane. That's crazy insane. No coin assigned to someone. Also, a BM hunter doesn't lose any damage doing that. For what it's worth, if you do it correctly. But I don't know. I think having a small group of people do a mechanic is cool when done right in a raid specifically.
Yeah, I guess to me the downfall of that is where if they are the only people with like a hard job and the rest of the raid is just waiting for them to get it right. Like Zakul was a big example.
Then that's just
of
a
this for
bad
me.
boss. You know,
Yeah.
that's just not. Like the mechanic is less of the issue more than just I don't know.
Yeah, I
I
don't
think
think
that
Bandit was
mechanic
too bad
leads
on
to
this
the
because
bad
it's not
boss.
like you usually weren't waiting for your hunter to figure out how to kick the coins
Yeah.
like that. That was not usually how that fight went. Your hunter getting better meant that they were doing more and more damage, but like they were usually hitting most of their shots after the first.
So like
couple
Kill
of rolls.
Jaden, like you get into the last phase of Kill Jaden, and you like they have all these pylons out, and the best thing to do is for everyone to not memorize where the right spot is. You're just gonna wait for one person to put a marker down, and then that's where you're gonna stand. And you just kind of trust that person. It's kind of the same thing. You get into that phase, and it's just like someone puts a marker on the ground, you go there, and you just throw your hands up and hope you don't die, you know? And you're gonna kill that boss as fast as that person progresses learning that mechanic, and you're putting all your faith in them. And that's. But I feel like those are fine.
I mean, I also feel like it just makes it for like two different fights. Because like if you don't have that person that's like doing that job, you can't really get a good raid night progression. I mean, it's kind of like the same as like the second boss, Carnage boss again, like the one who has to do the toys. Yeah, I know that's like something mechanic, but stuff like that.
Yeah, but the reason why you're not getting the progression is because you probably don't have the add-ons, or not using, or your raid leader isn't using the add-ons effectively. You know, like your raid leader has to have some kind of like end of the day, the raid leader has to have some kind of some kind of responsibility here, you know. So and when so like Dorky's like, well, it's hard to get progression. Well, you know, you start to look at other parts of your raid, other parts of your guild, you know, like, you know, this is why add-ons are going away, because the game is too like mechanical, basically.
It's just, I'm not a huge fan of those types of mechanics.
Where like one person has a harder job and then the rest of the raid is maybe waiting on them.
Maybe not necessarily a harder job, but like just a different job.
Yeah.
I do like those.
Yeah, I do like them too. And also, like, again, like Cauldron of Carnage is a perfect example. It becomes the easiest path of resistance to have one person do it. So, like, the way they designed that boss, and in a way you absolutely could have done it, is just like, hey guys, if you see one of these things near you, just like kind of kick it to the middle, and then we'll have like one person just do one more kick. But it's meant to be collaborative and have both sides work together. And there are mechanics where that is actually how it turns out, and you don't actually have one person do it. You have a group of people doing it, and I agree with Dranos. I actually like stuff like that.
Okay, any other interview questions we want to pull out?
There was one. So did you see that they responded to stops?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they were asked a question, how do you feel the change to stops has gone? One that we have talked about a lot, where like their emphasis on it, like, hey, we're going to put the power back in specifically kicks, because with stops being so OP, kicks don't matter. So we want kicks to be the thing that make these things no longer cast. They mentioned something that I actually didn't know, but I actually looked up and actually ended up being true, which is we think the game is in a healthier place overall with the way it works now, more within and most of WoW's lifespan. So actually for like a ton of WoW, this is actually exactly how it worked. If you stopped a really important spell, it was going to keep casting.
It recasts, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So there was actually only like, I think, a Dragonflight change.
No,
where
yeah,
that
it was literally
wasn't the
just
case.
Dragonflight. Yeah, it's a new change.
Bro, I didn't even know that. I did a fucking
Really?
ton
Yeah.
of dungeons. I did as many MDI dungeons as, or not MDI, what was it, challenge mode dungeons as anyone was. Like, I know MoP class.
It was Dragonflight, really? I
Yeah,
could have
yeah.
sworn like
Dragonflight.
Bro.
BFAM plus.
Bro.
Was...
No,
Yeah.
dude, no.
Dude,
Yeah,
wow.
like, remember
yeah,
when
my
they
brain is
brought
just
back
completely
Underrot
lying to me.
and the maggots used, or not the maggots, the lashers. The lashers used to recast, but they
Used
came
to chain
on
cast
all
at
the
you?
time.
Huh.
Yeah, and now you just like stop it once, and it's just well in Dragonflight
Not
when
now
they brought
anymore,
it
but
back.
like
Yeah,
that
not now
season,
anymore.
yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
That's
So
the
that's
season
I
they
had
brought
the
back.
same reaction
Wow.
you did, Dranos. I read that and I was like, that's not right. And then I fucking went back and looked. I'm like, wait, that is right. What the fuck? So okay. He said, that said, I think the changes we made in Season 2, specifically to how often things cast at all and how long cast bars are, and then they didn't mention this, but I think they also meant like how visual the like really important casts are, puts us in a healthier place. That I think we all agree with, right? Like having
Yeah.
having the important casts be longer and how often they cast it outside of like the stops thing, and them looking important if they are important. That is all good. But that's not what this question was about. They're asking about the other thing. You're still seeing keys pushed up into the 20s even after this change. And we do understand that it requires a little bit more coordination at a high level to execute some of these bigger pulls, but I think that's acceptable. You're at the bleeding edge of the system, and that's okay. The core experience of the 1 to 10 or even up to 12 is very doable and very reasonable, even in a pug setting after the change. So in summary, we're happy with it. We think we added some texture to creatures and player abilities, and no changes are planned at the moment. Your thoughts?
I actually didn't like this answer. For one, they dismissed it as like, oh, you know, from the 1 to 10 range, even up to 12s, it's completely fine because people are able to do it. Well, I mean, that's like true, but at the same time, they don't really like see why exactly it's true. It's true because it becomes a healer burden. Like we've talked about this many times. When kicks are just going off in a 1 to 12 key range, that's literally just like,
Let's get something straight. Everything in the game World of Warcraft and group content is a healer's burden. Everything is.
That's time to charge in.
So that number one thing.
all right, well, that's a healer problem, right? Like people aren't gonna use their kicks and stops at that healer level. So
Yet.
yeah, like on one hand, they are correct in the sense that like it's fine for them to go off, but on the other hand, it really sucks when you're a healer in these keys doing the lower keys and it feels like you're just requiring more healing in those keys than in a higher key, because like at higher keys obviously people are actually trying to kick and stop all the casts, but yeah, like it just becomes a healer job, and I don't think that's a good solution to it.
Yeah.
That, and also like them talking about slowing down important casts. The problem is like at a certain key level, like not even up to 20s, straight up just if you have 2 bolts go off from some mob in Priory or Rookery, like in Rookery you'll have those thunderers that are just spam casting bolts. Like I'm pretty sure it's like a 1.1 second cast, which is just absolutely ridiculous. And if 2-3 of them go off, someone just dies, and there's very little counterplay to that. So I didn't really like that answer to this question, but I also kind of see where they're coming from.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, like, I disagree about whether the game would be better if they reverted the change than they do. So, to some extent, and they're kind of justifying their side. So I'm always gonna disagree with that. It's definitely true that they brought up some true things. The game is better when spells are well telegraphed and easy to understand and have, you know, a good visual language for what's going on with a spell and stuff like that. Like that's true with or without the stop change being in there. And it's also true that people are doing high keys and doing low keys and having, you know, a lot of fun this season with this change being in there. I would argue that it's despite this change, not because of this change in any way, but it's clearly not like that big a deal as far as, you know, this is one of the best M+ seasons ever, and this change is here, so it clearly hasn't single-handedly killed M+.
Like, it could be better.
I do think it would be better if it was reverted, yeah, and I'll stick to that. I agree, like, it puts more of the burden on the healer. It also puts more of the burden on AoE stops. Like, it counterintuitively, you read it and you think, like, oh, this is they're taking the stop meta away, right? Like, that was some of the stuff that I saw when they first announced this, was people celebrating that
Oh yeah,
the
dude,
stop
and now
meta
we're
is
playing
going away.
fucking...
And,
We're
like,
playing
clearly
VDH and
this is
Boomkin.
moved the import further onto AoE stops, not taken it away, which I think, you know, if you examined, for instance, what was said about this change before it was made and what the reactions of the people that were in favor of it were back then, you will see that there's been some changing of like people explaining. The people who think it's good have changed why they think it's good, because it hasn't done that big thing that that was one of the goals with it at all. But
Dude, you know how
I mean, it is
ridiculous
nice
this
that the game works consistently, I guess. But I just don't think it's that. I don't think it's that big a deal that a mob in Wailing Caverns works the same way as a mob in an M+ dungeon. If they've invented a way that's better for high level content, which they did, they should keep using it.
Yeah, basically. You know, go with what works. Every mob doesn't have to be like engineered to be unique. Okay, like you're still getting the WoW experience. However, I think maybe one or two creatures or cast times or something like that. Like it can be adjusted. You know, like there's no reason it can't be that, because if it's not like that, then it's just copy and paste it in. You know.
I was watching Hopeful's group doing Priory, and Hopeful came up with this brilliant idea of just playing Mass Polymorph, a talent that almost nobody ever plays, as an extra stop. So now mages are doing 3 stops in a row. We're doing like grip into beam into the DH stops, and after DH stops, the mage does a triple stop. Then you fill that triple stop gap with like the pre-sphere into DK Sleet into Druid doing Aurora and Ursul's Typhoon, and then you go back to doing mage triple stop
like
again.
this before, because that is giving me flashbacks to literally Underrot on Rogue, where you would handle like 3 maggots because you would gouge and kidney them. They definitely didn't re-breath after you gouged or kidney to breath. That is 100. Maybe the Lashers worked that way, but it's definitely not true that mobs just used to work this way back then, because you would like lock down multiple maggots as a rogue back then.
Yeah. It's definitely gotten ridiculous.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, to some extent, you know, coming up with cool tech like using Mass Poly, and I do like, you know, innovation in M+. I just think that the way that the innovation is like, we are innovating to make the list of how long we can keep mobs AoE stopped longer. That's not particularly interesting or fun.
Yeah, we're PvPing the fucking mobs, and the mobs can't even play the game. Like, it's actually ridiculous the things that people have to do in order to get through these dungeons, and it just puts such a burden on the PUG players when they're expected to do this type of shit.
All right, any other 11-2 or interview questions?
Oh, I have one, and I had a cook about it, and I want you all to tell me if you think the cook is bad. Not something we normally talk about either, but like, how do you view players who? We talked about it last week briefly. How do you view players who need on every item in looking for group just to sell them? For gold?
It's just necessary evil for the most part. I like their solution here. Their solution is to have an additional roll. You can either roll for need, or you can roll for transmog. Okay, and if you roll transmog, one person that rolls for transmog also gets just gets the appearance of the item, but doesn't get the stats with it. I really like that. I think that's a really good time saver. I think it does everything. It does everything you need. Especially is I don't care about that piece of item. I just want it for Mog. You know, it'll help. The thing is, it might work too good. You know, which is, it's one of those things that probably should have been in the game a long time ago. But it does. However, it does stop people from playing the game. Okay, you have to also realize that they might run the dungeon or the raid less because of that. So you have to keep that in mind.
Are there any plans to address this? They respond, we're aware that this is a problem. There's been a lot of feedback. It's definitely something we've seen as well while playing the game. We understand that anytime a player is in a difficulty, they go into that difficulty under a certain social contract, and players who are in LFR together or group finder modes often don't come into those modes with a lot of social contracts. By the way, that part confused me. I think I'm too stupid to understand what the fuck he's talking about. That's so it can be frustrating to see that item drop that you really want.
No, and this goes into something I was talking about last time. Is I was talking about how each one of when you jump into a dungeon, it is a social contract. It's a social contract between you and the group of people in there to do to collectively understand what's going to happen in that dungeon. And I was talking about last time, how do we stop levers? Well, we stop levers. We stop levers by giving them a lever score, and maybe even a behavior score if you want to go that far. But we need to start using the tabs of standard run, a completion run, or a beat the timer run. Okay, and if you're doing a completion run, there needs to be an ante of gold, like 10,000 gold put out there, or 8,000 gold. So if you leave, 8,000 gold goes to your other 4 players for essentially wasting their time. Yeah, you're paying people for wasting their time, which is really, really good way to look at it. Like each time you go into a raid, sometimes not raid, I guess, but because I don't know, raid's bigger, so I feel like you get diminishing returns basically off this. But definitely an M plus, I think, because you have the ability to choose those 3 options. Beat the timer, you have kind of a social contract of how this is going to go, and not like. And resilient keys helps that a little bit, okay, but it doesn't help. Like sometimes you can just tell. Like, I think the biggest thing is not to allow tanks that are undergeared even in, like, they shouldn't be in certain level content. Like tanks, there should be no reason why you should entering into a social contract with a tank that's unable to tank the content at the level of which they queued for or are presenting themselves out is just adding you're just adding fuel to the fire, basically. You're asking for people to leave when that happens. Same thing with healers. You know, there probably needs to be gear eye level requirements for healers and tanks. It just might be the way it has to be balanced. So there's also a responsibility of Blizzard to like give us the tools to be able to appease this, part of not leaving. So.
And another player make off with it or sell it to the highest bidder. We don't have any plans to announce right now, but it's something that we're actively taking a look at and we'd like to address. I can tell you my cook, but one thing my chat immediately said is like, just do personally, but personally doesn't specifically do anything for this issue.
It does fix some of the problems with it. Like
what?
It feels worse to click need on something and then not get it, and then see it get sold, rather than just see the item go into somebody else's bag.
But the same thing is happening though. In personal loot, it's just
Psychologically,
for you.
But
psychologically, it's not as
there's
bad.
There was this study that they did where they like either gave you a piece of chocolate and then tried to buy it back from you, or tried to sell you a piece of chocolate, and if they gave you the chocolate first, you valued it way higher than if they tried to sell it to you before they gave it to you. So like literally just the part where like it becomes yours. Yeah, like the personal loot thing like changes where in the process the item becomes yours, or you're fighting for ownership over it. So I do think that you're right that like there's not actually a huge difference between personal loot and rolling need versus greed. But it is like, I do think it's psychologically would be better for LFR to go back to personal loot, and it would also remove the problem of like, if I'm a good person and I don't want to roll need on something I don't need, and so I only roll need on like 30% of items or something, just the 30% that are actually upgrades for me, I'm like losing gold compared to some jerk that's rolling on everything and trying to sell the stuff. And if it was personal loot, that would be a little bit less true, although I'd probably give away the items I don't need rather than try and sell them. So
you're losing gold by doing it.
I'd still lose out compared to a dishonest person or whatever. But...
So I remember when we brought this up, like I remember talking about this and saying how it's been a rampant problem. So it's like it's just something that people are doing more than ever before.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know when this started really, but I noticed this big time in Nerevar.
We talked about how gold being tradable cross-realm was a big part of the reason that this is like metastasized in the way that it has.
Yeah, because I do remember like Spy Master in particular. That was a high commodity item that was being pawned off nonstop. But after thinking about this a bit more, is this really a problem? Like, is it really that big of a deal if someone who joins your raid group, who, like, what is their incentive for being in the raid? I mean, they have equal part to the loot as much as everyone else, right? And so they also deserve something too, right? Like, it maybe they just signed up so that they...
So this kind of gets at a few things. They could just give everyone blatantly, uniformly across the board more money, but that just inflates everything. So, and then people will just do both. So you could do that too. There's not a huge solution, but I do like Max's solution that he's about to give here.
They can kill bosses and acquire loot, and if it's not something they can use, they should be able to just sell it off, right? Like, is there anything inherently wrong with that? I know, like, it feels wrong because, like, everyone else wants the item.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, my mind, but
That's the main
there's
problem.
nothing really
that,
wrong
like,
about it, right?
A lot of people feel icky when that happens in their runs, and so they complain about it. But you're right, there's not like anything inherently unfair. Everybody has the equal chance at the gear, and then if you win it, you either use it or you sell it. Like that, it's kind of the same thing as like GDKPs, right? Like, which Blizzard did go after in versions of Classic, but there's not really anything inherently wrong with them either, right?
Yeah. No, yeah. My cook, it might be bad. It was like 2 minutes was left at the end of my stream. I think I like instantly ended my stream after this. It was just
Oh, it's really good to do a controversial cook and then just stop
yeah,
streaming.
I don't know if it's controversial, but is there a transmog when you can roll for something? Can you roll for transmog?
Yeah.
Okay, so my thing is if you roll for transmog on an item instead of need, it should, regardless of who actually wins the item, of the people who roll transmog on them, it should just give you like a cosmetic thing in your bag that lets you learn the appearance for transmog. As a completely separate thing. So the only thing that changes is basically when you kill a boss and that chest piece drops, now 2 people total are getting that appearance if you care about it. The person who actually got the item and the person who just got it because they were rolling for Mog. And I don't know if, I mean, who the fuck cares, but like, I feel like that, because when I asked my chat, the people who were really mad was actually transmog collectors. They were like, I like farming Mog, and like, it's impossible to get these items because like, I know these people aren't even farming for Mog, but they're just like selling it. And I just want to like roll need and get it. So it was a transmog take.
Yeah, that I agree. Like, I don't think that's actually the biggest complaint on average, but I do think that the other problem that transmog hunters run into is if you do need an item, but for transmog, people yell at you or like get mad because they think that you shouldn't be able to need for transmog. And Blizzard has sort of, I think, reinforced this by making a transmog button that is lower price.
Yeah. Blizzard has Blizzard's done themselves in on this one. They literally make it a lower priority if you get that transmog button. So therefore they must hit need. Therefore but they've also come back and doubled down and said you can need on anything for any reason, and that's fair too. But then why not need on everything? So and then you start to get conversations like this, and you start getting to like, why don't bring back Master Looter, things like that. Do I think you need to bring it back? No. Even the high level guilds, like, I don't think need it, and I don't even think some of them use it. But the problem is with that idea is somebody else is playing the game for you, kind of thing. Like I didn't get House of Cards for, I got it on either got it on week 4 or week 6. Like, is that acceptable? Is that acceptable for a high, like, if I would have got the key pieces to my gearing, then, sky's the limit at that point. Like, you're talking about like easy 95 parses, like easy, just because you got a couple pieces, like one piece of gear, basically.
Priority than needing. But I do think if you're if you queue up for LFR and you're doing it because you want the Mog, you should be able to just need on items that you want them for Mog, right?
Well, the reality is because of the way the system works right now, if you go to LFR and you're doing it for Mog and you don't roll need on items, you're simply just not ever going to get them. So that just shows that there's a flaw in the system, which they did acknowledge. They just didn't acknowledge that was the problem. They are looking to address that.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't really have any great solutions to this besides a vague sense that personal loot would fix some of this, or would make it feel a little bit less icky. But I agree with both of you that like at the core, it's kind of, I don't know.
They answered a lever
Impossible.
question. They answered like a question about like the lever thing, and it's not really much more than they basically said like, yeah, we think levers are bad, and that's why we did this lever thing. And I know we talked about it before, but I just want to reiterate, I don't think that change is gonna do anything. I think.
Yeah.
I just don't. But I also don't know how widespread the actual issue of like legitimate grief leaving is.
Well, that's the thing is like, I don't think most people who are leaving are doing it because they're like joining groups and leaving them for fun like we do. Like they're usually just doing it because they're joining a group and trying to time it, and then they get mad or think it's depleted or whatever, and then hearth out, right? And
Yeah,
so,
but
like,
I don't think those people are going to be swayed by this. How long does the Scarlet Letter stand in character? You just log off and take a breather and then it's gone?
it seems like you have to actually do keys successfully to get it taken off of your record.
All I know is we messed around with it on PCR, and when we abandoned the group and we rejoined, there was like some message that pops up like if there's a guy in your group that
Is a fucking
is known for
lever.
leaving, or is a fucking lever. You have a fucking
so
lever,
funny.
dude.
That's so funny.
Yeah, it was kind of funny.
Did it like identified, like it said the name of the person?
Yeah, it needs to identify the person of who is the lever, because there's no point in having this if you don't know who it is, unless the only other way is to say you have an average lever score of this. You either state the score or you say the person, and call them out. Like, that's what this lever score is doing. Call them out and leave it at that. Just call them out. This is about personal responsibility. The lever score is about personal responsibility. That's what it's about. Make it that.
'Cause otherwise,
I don't remember actually.
It doesn't even name them? So it's like
If it doesn't,
scorched,
it
doesn't
it's,
remember.
it's like scorched earth. It doesn't name them, but you're in a group of 5 people. It's like someone's a lever. It's like, well, I gotta kick everybody. Better fucking start from the beginning.
there's
This
one
reminds me
imposter
of-
among us.
This reminds me of Dota, because like back in the old days of Dota, it was just kind of like the Wild West, right? You just played on BattleNet, and whatever you had this like bot, well not bot, like you had this program that you would use to detect levers, right? It would have like an entire blacklist of levers, and whenever someone joined, and that person was a lever, it would just go lever detected. That would just be the TTS, and that shit is like so ingrained in my brain. That's like the first thing I think about when I'm thinking about this whole situation. I'm sure some people could relate to that. But yeah, actually going back to
Well, and if you're in a foursome, and then all of a sudden you invite somebody here, okay? You invite them, and then all of a sudden it's like lever detected. Like we all know who it is, so you might as well just put it out there who it is, basically.
this whole selling loot epidemic, bro, I fucking hate boosters, man. The whole boosting problem has gotten so much worse these days.
What do you mean?
Like I never,
what do you mean
I was
boosters?
always a
Dungeons?
booster for the
Raids?
longest time.
Yeah, I was
the
gonna say, aren't
raid
you a
boosters.
booster? We're all boosters.
Yeah, I'm a booster. Yeah, I'm a booster. I love boosting for gold, but
But
ever
you hate that
since
other
But
this
you
patch,
hate the other boosters.
well,
yeah.
oh no, yeah. So
Well,
ever
yeah, I mean,
since
that
this
makes sense. They're
patch,
driving down the prices.
not only that, but like they're also just so for one, all the fucking top raider IO people are just like buying insane raid boost gear, and they're just like straight up zooting themselves to like max loot in the first few weeks of the patch,
we support
and that is like so annoying. It's like,
We
man,
support
these fuckers are just like buying all the loot and then they're just like crushing all these keys, and I just can't do anything about it. It's especially
But what does that say about the game? Like, that's what I'm looking at, is what does that say at the status of the game, that if gear doesn't matter and then yet you give them all the gear, and then they're able to achieve equal or similar level to those that are working really hard, then what does that say about the game? You know? That just tells me that when you give gear is just like a part of the solution kind of thing. So, and I'm not saying it's a good or a bad thing. That's for everyone to decide. So,
Victory for Sylvanas.
It's in the Chinese region, right? Like in the Chinese region, they're just able to full on hard RMT, like very straight up, just piloting characters and shit. They don't even care. And
bro, Bean, they've been doing that forever. That's their bullshit.
And now that they're like dominating the leaderboards, it's so rough. It's so annoying that these guys are just like so much more geared. So that's the first problem. The second...
Right. They're geared. Oh, it's like, this is the thing. It's, oh, that's my leaderboard. You know? No, it's that somebody has gear and someone wasn't able to put as much time into the game. And so they're now getting gear, and now they're able to actually put time into the game with gear already, and they're actually making the margin smaller. They're making they're making the game more competitive, and complaining about that is not where it needs to be. Like, you should be complaining if the gap was widening, which is what you were doing like most of this podcast for So the other issue is so they shrink that, So really what you're saying is they shouldn't boost, basically, even though you're saying they should boost. Like, so, you gotta be on one side or the other. You either want this game to be more competitive and pushing more players to be on your level and to be able to relate with you, or you want to be standing on the mountain by yourself. Like, which is it?
Second problem is buyers being in the raid all the time. They're just yoinking up all the goddamn loot. There's nothing more annoying than it's like, oh, well, like, we can't give out loot because, we have a buyer who reserved every single piece of loot in the raid, so we're just giving out our drafts or diamonds and all that shit. It's like, man, this is just so fucking annoying. Like,
there has been some seasons where, like, our raiders have had absolute minty bees about that.
Oh,
like,
yeah, I've heard stories about this
they get
shit.
so mad because, like, especially the Mythic Plusers, which there's only a few of, but, like, the people who want to do Mythic Plus, like, they just need this specific trinket, and someone is buying it every week because it's so good, and they are so tilted.
Yeah, but somebody's selling it too. Like, so I mean, that's just how it is. It's like somebody else is also selling it. So
or it's like only it's like always their raid where it's fun.
Dude, it's so pretty.
It's every raid.
Yeah, like
Would agree.
Spy Masters or
Like,
Rares in the
well,
box.
it's not. Okay, first.
Past that yet.
Well, it depends on the item, but if you in the first 2 weeks, first 4 weeks, I would say, if you get really, really good drops off like a last boss, like a rare drop or something like that, you're going to get smashed with many whispers, basically, and it's just gonna be that way, and there's going to be a lot of people, and the way I deal with it personally is I just let them bet against themselves. I'm just like, hey, there's a higher bid than you. It's like, would you like to bid higher? And usually what I do is I keep the item. Usually I don't sell the item, but some people are different. So some people sell it, some people don't.
You want
Very
the,
very rares, yeah.
the third boss, Nerebar Palace necklace. That thing was absolutely impossible to get on one of your
That was a
raiders.
hard
Yeah.
one. Yeah. I
Yeah.
never got that shit.
Yeah, I agree. I wish buyers would pay more and take less loot. That's my main problem with buyers as well.
I wish they would just give me all the loot or all the money.
Exactly. in a world of resilient leagues, it's maybe worth Blizzard rethinking whether, like, their policy around people buying M plus stuff, because I think that, you know, like, selling title, they should maybe think about just banning that, making it so you can't sell title.
Well, and that's what I'm saying is, like, so you can't sell title, or you can't sell, you know, how far are we going to take this, you know? And what do we want as a community? What do we want, to go back to Magnus Carlsen, what do we want our community to have in our champions, you know? Like, what do we want our chess champion to be? What do we want him to accomplish? Who does he have to play? What format does he have to play? You know, all these questions have to be doing this. If Dorky, if anyone, not just Dorky, but if anyone has a problem with the shrinking competitive margins, basically, that you're seeing from years past and expansions past, if you really have a problem with that and you think boosting is the problem with that because they are that good of a player, if they're doing that, they just have gear now. Okay, so if you don't like that, then you need to shut off boosting, or boosting, like I presented, needs to be, or lockouts in general need to be on server side. Like, you need to buy lockouts from Blizzard. You need to spend X, whatever the going rate is, just like the WoW token. He's like, so maybe it changes week to week. Maybe week one is 50 million gold for a Gallywix, you know, final boss, or maybe it's not available. Maybe they're not available, but then on week 10, lockouts are now available. No one can sell their lockouts, but by doing so, you're also like taking some of the wind out of some of the main reasons why some people play this game, you know, at a very high level. So you have to, you know, you'll also be doing that to the community as well. So you have to kind of keep that in mind. But at the end of the day, it comes down to what the community wants. Personally, I want Blizzard to control all that. I don't care really, but I think it would be cool that Blizzard actually regulates the lockouts that go out, because what it would do is by people getting these achievements and titles, it actually takes away from the integrity of the title and what it means. Okay, and so, because if you have a title and no one cares, like if you're the, you know, if you have, it just doesn't matter what title it is, you know, and no one cares. Why does it matter? It's irrelevant. Like, there's no integrity in that. However, if you see like a title out there that, you know, this dude worked hard for and, you know, grinded, you know, you see, and I don't really know a good one off the top of my head, but if you know somebody and see a title that they grinded, and there's no way to cheat that title, there's no way for any of it to work out. You just know that dude grinded for 14 hours straight to get that or more. Like, that's respect. And with that respect is the integrity. So, what do we want out of our game? You know, that's what we have to ask ourselves.
Title. I don't know.
Oh,
Yeah,
dude,
I'm
they're actually.
That's interesting that exists. I think. But is that any different than, like, selling someone a cutting edge clear?
Well, you take away somebody else's title slot every time you sell somebody.
Yeah, okay, so that's how it's different. Okay,
to me, that's the big thing. That's like,
same thing with arena rank 1 carries. Like, well, those are mostly piloted. That's maybe another issue. But how do you? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
are the M plus ones piloted?
No, not.
I mean, there are, but not. It's not as like.
There are a lot of
rampant.
unpiloted ones compared to
Yeah.
PvP. Yeah. Especially if you play something like, whenever there's an AUG season, you just play your own AUG and collect your title for the low.
It is kind of
low
crazy.
price.
A lot of people have been done for this M plus season, more so than before, because of like the whole resilient key system. I know a lot of people who have like in the high key range, who have like gotten resilient 20 or 19s, and they're basically done with M plus for the season. Even though they've had a lot of fun, it's just like it's a lot easier to get done. It's like milestones. I think we talked about this last week too.
Yeah.
You reach like a certain point where it's like, all right, you know, Resilient 20s, like it's kind of hard to just go past that. We've hit our goals. We're done for the season.
I don't think that's inherently bad. Like,
It's not bad.
Yeah, not
if you have a
necessarily.
fun
Yeah.
M plus
You just
season,
get
and
done
then
a lot quicker.
you hit your. I think the thing that would be bad is if you think to yourself, man, I'd like to push some M plus, and then something about the reward structure makes you feel like, that's stupid. What's the point, right? So I'm not arguing that that is impossible. That could be happening, but I do think it would be there's totally healthy systems where you just at some point are done.
I think in a reasonable adult life that you have a limited time and things like that to get some of these things done in a reasonable amount of time. I think we all have to agree that we have to. There's going to be a reasonable amount of time and an unreasonable amount of time that you can accomplish such a thing, and so I think the hardest thing at the end of the season, at the beginning of the new, is the game gets so easy where people in raid are like, oh yeah, next season I'm gonna get CE and I'm gonna do all this, and then what they haven't changed or grown as a player. And I think that's what I see the most for myself is they haven't done the steps, they haven't looked into their logs, they haven't done the down and dirty work to actually make their skill level better to be in that next category of player. Not only would and by not doing that, you can't even show your logs off to players next to you and be like, oh well, I did X, Y, and Z differently, than last year or this season or next season. So like you gotta have something to show for it, at the end of the day. Yeah, do that. So
until next season, then
Yeah.
you have a great time.
I guess there is something that is a little bit of feels bad. I remember talking about this with Grau, where
Health warning.
it's kind of a shitty feeling when you hit a wall and
yeah, hit a wall. What sucks is stagnation. Okay, that's what we're finding out. The problem is by the time we actually get the gear, by the time we actually get geared enough for average players to actually get the CE stuff, they've either lost interest or they're so far behind that it would take them 4 to 5 weeks to get gear back up. And even if they do that, they're still, they haven't played the game for a couple weeks, so they're not putting the effort. So and the thing is in your rage that you're trying to get CE late in the season, like these people are trying to come back to the game maybe because they had something going on in their life or whatever, but they're still unable to achieve this stuff because then that's when the add-on argument comes in and everything else. But I'm just saying from a time allocation standpoint, like it's not possible basically. So or it's not likely, I should say. It's definitely possible. And for me, it's like I've watched this time and time again, to where people just stagnate, and they don't do, they don't improve. There's just no incentive to improve. And then they get to the end of the season, it's so nerfed that they think they're better than what they are because they're clearing things that they should have been clearing week 4 or 5 or 6. But then and they're clearing things week 15 or week 20, and they go into the next season and they just get crushed. Their dreams, their hopes, everything gets crushed again. And then they build themselves out slowly, and then, so it's that for me. It's, finding the group of people that can actually, do that, basically.
just hard gated. It's like, okay, this is my limit. This is as far as I can go. And when you get to that point where people are doing 1 or 2 key levels higher than you, it's a bad feeling. It's like you just can't go any further.
And that's
than
life, right?
Yeah.
Happens.
Yeah, get good.
Happens.
So there, that's from a M plus perspective. If you're wanting to push M plus to a higher level, and if they're 2 key level, if 2 keys, it could be 3 keys, difference. It really doesn't matter what the margin is. It's there's going to be a feel bad. Like if two being 2 keys ahead of another team is where it's at, but there's no reward for, during the season, during the first 10 weeks of the season. There's no reward other than personal glory. There's no extra, there's nothing extra to it. You're not getting a reward for it, other than because after week 4, I don't know, after a couple weeks, heroic gear means nothing. So, maybe the first month, it's and then if a piece of heroic gear does mean something, it's because it's a low drop rate, or you've just been systematically screwed, by your vault and by, I'll just go with what we were talking about earlier. And what they were talking about earlier is they're talking about people needing on everything. So
You reach
What
your
can
limit.
you do?
Reach your natty limit.
The only way you
and
could
fix
solve that
race.
problem is by capping it at a certain difficulty where everyone can reach it, and it's just
Right.
that's just
Yeah.
worse. That's so.
Well, it is worse because that means people aren't reaching their actual true potential in the game. However, so it almost seems like the game modes need to. It almost seems like the grind for gear is less advantageous than ever before. Okay, in that people just want their gear. They figured out they figured out the equations. They've done all this. They just want to do the do the problem the way they know how to, and they don't necessarily want to spend that time doing it. And the thing is then the problem is if you don't give those players that grind, then they feel like it's just any other game kind of thing, and then they'll lose interest quicker. To where if you give them incentive and grinding and things like that, they'll keep doing the same things. They'll keep playing and come back. So, there has to be some of that as well. So, but I don't know. That's a bigger issue for Blizzard.
It sucks.
Just remember as well, if you ever reach a skill ceiling, instead of getting better, you can always start a podcast to talk about the game type instead.
This is true. You can always. There's infinite possibilities when you're talking into a microphone.
Infinitely scaling form of content there.
Beware.
Oh, yeah.
And on that note,
What will you
I think
require?
that's all we've got for this week. We'll be back
Remember.
either
Dude,
next week.
Sorry, before we do that, would it ever be a funny bit if we just went live one week, didn't talk about WoW, but then cosplayed one of those alpha male podcasts?
Oh my god. I'd be
Maybe
so
it's
down.
maybe it's bonus content, but I feel like if we got a little bit of a script for that with just not hard script every word, but general talking points and what each of us is gonna kind of argue for, I feel like that could be extremely funny.
We could do it for April Fools. Well, actually, I kind of.
Have you guys seen those podcasts or seen clips of them where it's just the worst person is just talking about being a dude and a guy and stuff, and it's so bad.
I've
man.
never seen one of those, but I can imagine exactly what you're talking
Yeah,
about.
some Andrew Tate ass enjoyers. Yeah, it's fucking they're everywhere too. There's
Dude,
so
some of
many
them get you as well because you listen to the first 3 minutes of somebody talk and they're saying stuff about how you should clean your room and eat healthy.
Yeah, they go on to talk about that they don't make their bed in the morning, and they go through why you should make your bed in the morning. And the thing basically is personal, like you should. The reason why you should make your bed in the morning is because you start the day fresh in the same way every time. You get out of bed, you do your routine, and then you go about your day. And then when you come back to your bed, it's uniform. It's the same. You get back in your bed, and you do it all over again. You know, it's the driving. It's a driving factor, and which you pull kind of that. Even though I had a really bad day, I'm gonna come home, and my bed's gonna be made, and it's gonna feel amazing, and you know, I'm gonna go to sleep, and I'm gonna have a good restful sleep, and I'm gonna do that. So, you know, they bring up some really good points here. So, but other than that, I don't think they get into that necessarily. But that's where the rest of the conversation goes. So yeah, definitely good podcast. I enjoy Dratnos, Maximum, and Dorky. I enjoy their commentary. Even though I find that sometimes they don't go into depth that I wish they would, but that gives me room to commentary as well. So yeah, definitely. I appreciate the viewership. If you've made it this far, definitely subscribe to the channel. Definitely follow me on Twitch. Definitely follow me on YouTube and things. Helps. It's free. Helps channel grow. So.